All right, here we go. I hereby call to order the City of Margate Planning Board regular meeting for May 30th, 2024 at 6:30 PM. Please rise and join me in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call.
Tom Collins. Here. Craig Palmisano. Here. Richard Patterson.
Here.
John Pitts.
Here.
Jim Galantino.
Here.
Margaret Gubernolti.
Here.
Stephen Giuseppe.
Here.
Michael Ruffey.
Here.
Andrew Campbell.
Here.
Michael Richmond.
Here. Okay, this meeting is being held in accordance with New Jersey statute requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act Sunshine Law. Notice of this meeting has been advertised in the press and posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building. All applicants are hereby advised that if you receive board approval tonight, you must come forward and sign a form outlining the procedures for obtaining building permits and mercantile licenses. At the conclusion of your case tonight, please approach the board administrator to sign the provided information sheet. All right, now we're going to have the approval of the minutes. Meeting of May 15, 2024.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Go ahead.
A couple of points maybe of correction.
Sure. Oops.
On 19/20/24,
Is this the minutes or the resolutions?
this is the resolution?
Oh, we're on
the
minutes.
Sorry.
Okay, and here we go with the resolution. That's all right.
We need a new motion?
I'm going to read that. Okay. Approval of decisions and resolutions. Number 14, 2024, Charles and Eileen Labar. Number 15, 2024.
I don't mean to interrupt you. Did we approve the minutes?
No.
No. So we need a motion and we have a motion and a second for the minutes.
Okay, well, he interrupted me. All in favor?
No problem.
Sorry.
And then
Threw me off.
I guess
Okay.
before you even make read the resolutions, go ahead. You had an
Yeah.
issue with something?
So 19/20/24, the tequila bar, item 10, states in reference the dumpsters rolling door or doors to enclose them. I think the rolling door was on the inside of the building? No.
Outside.
Outside.
It was outside.
Like if you're facing it from Monroe
It
Avenue?
hid the things from the public.
Solid wall inside, solid wall inside?
Yeah.
Solid wall inside.
Right.
With a rolling door.
No.
No.
Rolling door outside. Rolling door outside.
Rolling door is outside?
Yeah,
Can't have a solid wall, with a rolling door.
right.
Yeah. So it's for two dumpsters, and they said it'll either be one rolling door or two doors. So that's why I said door to doors.
Okay.
Is that,
All right. Was that it, John?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, good. All right, number 14, 2024, Charles and Eileen Labar. Number 15, 2024, Gregory and Michelle Greenberg. Number 16, 2024, Kyle Pollock. Number 17, 2024, Ronald and Sherry Raphael. Number 18, 2024, Gregory and Rachel George. Number 19, 2024, Sunrise Wine and Tequila LLC. And number 20, 2024, Esther and Mark Kaplan.
Make a motion.
second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
And we'll just note that you're an abstention if you weren't here for either of those two meetings where we dealt with those cases. Same thing with the minutes from the 15th.
Yeah, it was two meetings, not one.
Yeah.
Okay. The first case is 109 South Argyle LLC, 109 South Argyle Avenue, Block 1.02, Lot 6, located in the S30 zoning district, seeking C variance for relief for deck, building height, side yard setback, rear yard setback, front yard landscaping, total landscaping, and potentially others in order to elevate the existing single-family home. Current on taxes, water and sewer payments, proof of advertising and notifications provided, represented by Steve Hankin, who is not here tonight, so
Yes, I'm Steve Hankins, Associate Attorney.
Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board, board professionals. My name is Kevin Balistreri. I'm an Associate Attorney with the law firm of Hankins, Sandman, Palladino, Weintraub, and Bell.
Mr. Balistreri, I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm going to get our board engineer and planner sworn in, and
Oh,
he
please.
usually goes through his report, does a brief overview, and then we'll turn it over to you.
Apologies, go ahead.
No, that's okay. Mr. McLaren, please raise your right hand. You swear from the testimony you'll give throughout this evening will be the truth?
I do.
Great, thank you.
Do you want to finish your introduction, Kevin?
Quite all right, go ahead.
That's all right. Shoot, I was enjoying your talk. All right. My report is first initially written in March 18th, 2024, and since been revised this month in relation to the application of Seth Lair, 109 South Largo Avenue, Block 1.02, Lot 6, located in the S30 zone. FEMA Zone AE Elevation 10. Seeking C variances, planning, zoning, and engineering report as needed, been deemed complete, and heavy on the substantial benefit variance. The background is as follows. The applicant is seeking relief from the ordinances of the city of Margate in order to elevate an existing single-family dwelling on the beach on Atlantic City side of Warrego Avenue. There are existing non-conforming issues that become variances due to the proposed vertical expansion of the structure because the state law hamstrings us to anything over base flood +3. Any existing nonconformities become variances, even though here in Margate, we allow higher than that for garages below. So my zoning chart is on page 2. I would like to point out that there are some clarifications based on my conversations with the applicant's engineer and planner. So we were able to reduce some variances, and by clarification of relooking at the plans, the front yard setbacks to the porches and the second floor deck go away. They are in compliance. It was unclear initially, and now that is okay. So the zoning chart continues on page 3, along with the documents reviewed and the plans reviewed on page 4. And I'll go over the variances as identified, and again, they'll be modified based on the testimony provided by the applicant's planner. So the variances required are a side yard setback to the building on the right side. Again, this is an existing nonconformity. Because we're going higher than base flood +3, it becomes a variance. The side yard setback is 10 feet, 9.41 feet exists, and 9.41 feet is proposed for the lift. It's an expansion of a nonconforming setback. Side yard setback to the building combined, and again, with a lot this wide, the maximum combined side yard is 22 feet. There were 21.33 feet, and 21.33 feet is proposed. So it's basically 8 inches they're off. Rear yard setback to the building, because the lot is more narrow, it's not as deep as it is wide. The minimum rear yard setback is 20% of the lot width, or lot depth rather. 12.5 feet is required, 5.12 feet exists, and 5.12 feet is proposed. Again, it's an expansion of the non-conforming. They're not changing the location, the size and shape of the house, other than making it higher. Rear yard setback to the deck, there's 2 of them. Whereas the minimum rear yard setback, again, 20 feet, and 20% of lot depth. And again, our ordinance says any decks over 18 inches have to meet the setback requirement of the principal structure. So it's about 5.5 feet existing and proposed, where 12.5 feet is required. It's already non-conforming anyway, because it's less, like I said, it's 5.5 feet and over 18 inches. Rear yard setback to the beachfront deck, again, it's the landing portion, so it's very minor. Again, anything over 18 inches from grade, and this is much higher than 18 inches from grade. 12.5 feet is required, 10.7 feet about exists, and 10.7 feet is proposed. Principal building coverage, actually, that's really not a variance because they aren't expanding anything, so that was clarified earlier today. Front yard landscape coverage, I believe that this will be near or fully compliant. Right now, it's a variance because it's existing non-conforming. Total landscape coverage, I believe that variance will be going away, but provided the testimony, it's still listed as a variance. Principal building height, whereas the maximum permitted principal building height is 30 feet above base flood, 30.10 feet exist, and 31.65 feet is proposed. And again, it's the anomaly behind of going higher than base flood +3. to a higher elevation, and it's an existing structure. Beachfront deck height is the final variance where our ordinance requires a maximum height of base flood elevation plus 20 inches, which would be 11.67 feet based on BFE of 10, and 16.2 feet is proposed. So it's about 4.5 feet higher than permitted. And again, the testimony will indicate and show why that is. They're building a higher bulkhead than required, and this house has received damage from Hurricane Sandy. Based on Jimmy and I we were looking at the damaged structures in 2012, and it was in fact listed as one of the damaged structures, even though the height of it is now. I'm not going to go through all my comments. Leave it up to the engineer and planner to discuss and see what kind of variances we can whittle down. So John, I turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. McLaren. Once again, my name is Kevin Balistreri. I have the pleasure tonight of representing the applicant, LLC. From our perspective, although there are a number of variances required by virtue of going vertical, we're not expanding the envelope of the property. We are not adding a single additional square foot of livable space. We simply want to raise the house in its present configuration. My client is also proposing to build a bulkhead along property. Even though it's on city property, he's willing to foot that cost. It's currently 11 feet. 13 foot is the standard. He wants to go to 15 feet, and we'll explain why during the testimony this evening. But we do think that's a considerable benefit to my client, the applicant, as well as the neighbors and the taxpayers. So I'm joined this evening by Seth Lear, the owner of the property, as well as my expert planner and engineer, John Barnhart from Arthur Ponzio Company, and our architect, John Obelinas, is also present in case there are any questions for him. So with your permission, Mr. Chair, I'd like to begin by calling up my client, Seth Lear.
Okay.
Lear, come on up.
Mr. Lear, you can come up and I'll get you sworn in. Mr. Balistreri, technically the applicant's this LLC, but he's the member? or-
Correct. He's the
okay.
managing member. And Mr. Lear is having some back issues. He's having surgery on Wednesday. With your permission, I'd like to have him seated during his testimony.
Yeah, that's fine.
Is this
And
microphone
that should work, yeah.
Great. Should test this. Perfect.
Yep, that's fine. Here's your microphone.
Okay, Mr. Lear, just give us, we know your address, so just give us your name for the record and I'll swear you in.
Seth Lear.
And Mr. Lear, please raise your right hand. You swear affirm the testimony you'll give this evening will be the truth?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Mr. Lear, are you in fact the managing member of the applicant LLC?
Yes.
All right. And when did you first acquire this property?
18 years ago in March.
All right. When you first acquired the property, you decided to do substantial renovations and restoration instead of tearing it down. Is that correct?
Yes.
And why did you make that decision?
We love the house. It's a unique 1970s designed house that we think adds to the flavor of the community and the neighborhood. We think the lines are beautiful, and so that's why.
You heard some commentary earlier about Hurricane Sandy. Was your home in fact damaged in Hurricane Sandy in 2012?
Yes.
And can you please describe for the board members the extent of that damage?
Sure, and it happened two ways. One is we got flooding from the water coming up from the bay, and we have a crawl space through our garage underneath the steps that goes down a few feet maybe, and so that filled up with water. And then the front loaders and equipment pushed sand up against the bulkhead in anticipation of the storm. I think it was a pretty good idea. It didn't work out maybe as expected. That created a ramp. So when the waves came, it took all that sand, dumped it onto my house, mixed in with the bay water, and then filled my crawl space with packed sand up to the floor, the joists, whatever. That sand was deposited against the house, leached into the house, and destroyed the flooring of the first floor. So it used to be we had a 5-foot step down to the beach. You could walk from my deck straight onto the beach with no step down again at all after the storm.
And in addition to the damage to the flooring and to the crawl space, was there any other damage to the HVAC system in your house or to the electrical system?
So all the HVAC ductwork, electric work in the crawl space was destroyed. The compressors were destroyed. The flooring was destroyed. I don't remember the exact number, but it was close to $100,000 in damage.
And what about the landscaping to your property? Was there any
That
damage
was
to that as well?
completely destroyed and not covered by insurance. It was completely encased in sand.
Okay. Mr. Lear, you're here today asking the board to allow you to raise your home up by about 5.5 feet,
Yes.
which is, I believe, 2.7 feet higher than you could do by right, but we'll have testimony from my planner about that if I'm wrong about that number. Why do you want to raise the home?
Well, the thought of it started as I noticed a lot of sand being pushed against the bulkhead now, and that's, I think, coming from the winds blowing the sand off the dunes and just the natural buildup. And so it began to look to me like this ramp that was put before. And with all the forecasts of the hurricanes and the hot water, I just think it's a matter of time before another storm comes. So I was looking at raising it to protect from flooding from the bay and from the ocean. And I didn't think it was going to be a particularly expensive process, but my builder told me it's a very expensive process. He's an expensive builder, which means it's really expensive. And if I was going to raise it to protect it, investing all that money, I also said, let me raise it to a point where I can at least see over the dunes too, because that incremental cost wasn't so great. And the height that we settled on was the one that made the house look as best as it could look in this raised version. It gave us an okay view from the deck, and I know the dunes will grow and that is what it is. And it gave us, with the higher bulkhead, really a lot of protection in case there's a storm.
Mr. Lear, I passed out a packet of photographs to the board members this evening. Do you have a copy of that packet?
I do.
And I want to take you through a few of these. Did you take some of these photographs?
The first ones that I see, yes.
Okay, I want to take you through those. Would you like me to mark them as I go, Mr. Manos?
Sure, you can mark them as you go. If you want to mark the whole packet, it's up to you.
Should we mark the whole packet as A1 and just do it by page number? I think
Yeah.
that's most convenient for the
That
record.
works.
Okay, so we'll call this A1.
A1 packet of whatever pages of photos. We can determine that later.
Thank you. Mr. Lear, the first photograph, did you take that picture?
I did.
And what are we looking at in this photograph?
So we're looking from Argyle Avenue, looking at my house, off-season.
Okay. And so that is the street view?
Yes.
All right. And the second photograph, page 2, I'll call it, of A1?
That's from, I think, maybe the top of the dunes walkway looking down to my house.
And is this a recent photograph?
It would have been from this past winter.
Okay, and that drop down, is that the drop down where those stairs are that you said used to be 5 feet?
Yes.
And what is it now approximately?
Couple feet.
Okay. The third photograph, if you would?
So-
Page 3?
This photograph and the next one are more close-up pictures because the level of the sand against the dune isn't absolutely flat. It goes up and down in different areas. And this is where the bulkhead for my property, I think, meets the bulkhead, I believe, from the street. And you can see how high it is, and you see it better in the last photo,
That'd be page 4?
page 4, where you can
Sorry about
really
that.
see the sand coming up to the top of the bulkhead.
And is that what you mean when you said it basically makes a ramp for the water to come
Yes.
up and over?
Yes.
All right.
And I think it would just ultimately just breach it. The sand will naturally overflow as it continues to build.
Mr. Lear, you're also proposing to build a new and higher bulkhead along the property line, is that
Yes.
correct?
Yeah.
And why are you doing that?
I don't know how high is high enough to protect, but this sounded like a really good height for protecting, from the sand.
And that bulkhead would run across your property line?
Yes.
Or down to the corner of Argyle?
From my property line to Argyle is our bulkhead, yes, if that's what you're asking.
Perfect. And that is technically city property? Is that right?
I don't know.
Okay. In speaking with your professionals, were you made aware that you had other options beside this plan?
Yes.
Okay, and one of those would be to raise the crawl space that we're proposing up to 9 feet and park cars underneath your house.
Yes.
And if you did that, the house could actually be taller than we're proposing tonight.
Yes.
Why didn't you choose that route?
I think it would destroy the aesthetics of the house. I mean, I've seen houses that have been raised and the bottom looks horrible relative to the top. It just doesn't look right. And again, We love the house, and we think our neighbors love the house. Everyone likes the house. And it practically doesn't work because of the way our internal stairs works. There's no way to connect internally what is now the first floor, which would be the second floor, to the new first floor. So you would have very, very high stairs going up to it. And in the garage, you would have to have a series of like switchback steps to get into the house. And you can't get from that first floor inside up without really destroying the first floor of the house.
So the layout caused problems with that idea?
Yeah, it just, and then trying to connect that height, those decks to the first floor, it was just a mess. It was just a mess.
And another option would be just tear down the house and build a new home, correct?
Yes,
And if we did that, we could actually go higher, right?
yes.
But again, you said you love the property, you want to preserve the unique, distinctive 1970s architecture, is that right?
We don't like the box houses we see.
Fair enough. In designing this plan, I'm almost finished, by the way.
Mhm.
In designing this plan, were you cognizant, were you sensitive to your neighbor's privacy, your neighbor's views, their light, air, and open space?
Very much so.
And did you discuss the plan with them?
Yes, I did.
And what was the overall reaction that you got?
Supportive,
Okay,
yeah. And yes, very much so. My neighbors are here.
all right, excellent. I have no further questions. for my
Well,
client.
just because they did come. Tammy Rosen, who lives 3 houses off the beach on my side. The Shalales, Diane and Jeffrey, who live 3 houses across the street off the beach. And Lloyd Levinson, who lives immediately next to me. And it's his house which would be most impacted because we're directly next to him.
And when you say next to you, you're one from the beach and
Yes.
he's 2, kind of behind you?
I'm on the beach and then he's next, yes.
Okay, great. I have no further questions.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for the time, I appreciate it.
If there's no questions for my client, I'd like to call my professional planner and engineer, John Barnhart.
I have a question, it's not for your client. Oh, well, you don't have an elevator in the house, right?
Do not.
No, okay. And I have a question for Mr. Galantino. So from what I understand, the state is going to, or I don't know, is the, whatever, the government in general or FEMA, they're going to require, right now, his floor would have to be at 14, right? To be legal, or,
It's 9. 9's that right?
He's in 10, so the lowest, highest elevation he could be would be 14, yes.
14. So, from what I understand, the flood heights are going to get raised again? Is that correct? Huh?
Next year,
Next year,
Next year.
right. And what are they going to get raised to?
5.
So if he's at 14 now, what would he be at?
We would have to go to 15.
But we give that extra foot to get rid of the water-resistant material.
Right.
Right, so he'd be about 16 feet.
Right.
Right,
And they're thinking about an additional foot to top.
Right, right,
6.
right. So if he went to 14 because we did, it didn't happen at 16, which is going to happen next year, then when they do raise it to 16, then in a year his house would be non-conforming.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's our understanding as well.
Hmm?
That is our understanding as well.
Yeah. Okay.
My next.
Does the board kind of understand that? Okay.
Mike, I'm actually going to go through that specifically because I've
Right.
I've read the rules in detail and I'm going to talk about that.
Great.
All right, you ready for Mr. Barnhart?
I am, if you are, yes.
Mr. Barnhart, just give us your name and business address, please.
Sure. John Barnhart, office address 400 North Dover Avenue, Atlantic City.
Okay, and please raise your right hand. You swear affirm the testimony you'll give this evening will be the truth?
I do.
And Mr. Chairman, I assume as a planner and engineer, we accept his credentials?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Barnhart, if you would be so kind, please take us through the application from your perspective and give them an overview and analysis.
Sure. So the plan before you is the same plan that was submitted with the application. And I'll just talk quickly about the existing conditions and then go right into the proposal. The plan the main plan that you see here in the center of the document is essentially what exists today, with 2 minor exceptions. Everything that sits on this property gets elevated to the 16.71 finished floor elevation, there are some changes necessary to the front stair. As you can see here, we are proposing to add a little bit of concrete to have a third exterior parking space. And we are proposing to cut back the deck structures along Argyle Avenue. That's the extent of what would take place as far as changes are concerned. Everything else on the site just goes straight up in its existing position. Just briefly, the Argyle Avenue deck structure, just so you can put it into perspective, because I think it's important to show some of the benefits of what this project is proposing, is that the existing first floor deck, which obviously is low, is at 6.4 feet. The average front yard setback for a porch or deck there is actually 5.1. So technically, our client could take that deck in its existing position straight up, and it would comply insofar as front yard setback is concerned. But what he decided to do was create some additional landscape, cut those decks back along the front, and actually he's proposing 10.1, so he's actually more than double the required front yard setback for those decks in the proposed condition. So as I mentioned, this entire project is a house raising. It does cause a number of variances, as you can see from Mr. McLaren's report. Mr. McLaren did get into some of the variances that we were able to eliminate through discussion and some minor changes. And I guess I'll just lead off with those because it does actually take 5 variances off the table, which is pretty major. The first is exactly what I just discussed. If you look at the front yard setback requirements in Mr. McLaren's report for porches and second floor decks, neither of those are actually variances. Our front yard, our main porch setback is 10.1 feet, and the second level actually steps back about another 18 inches. So both of the decks on the front of this house on Argyle Avenue will comply. The other item that Mr. McLaren pointed out is technically not a variance is that we are not adding 1 square foot of building. The building is going up in its existing footprint, so there would be no variance necessary for building coverage. It would just be an existing nonconformity. The fourth item is with regard to landscaping. We have discussed with our client, there was supposed to be a concrete walk connecting the driveway to the front walk, and we discussed with our client that a better option would be to take the landscaping out to the back of the public sidewalk and just utilize that public sidewalk for access to his front door, which picks up a considerable amount of existing landscaping. That does 2 things. One is it gives us a net difference of 0 change from the existing condition. So we're not reducing the landscape coverage, so that would be an existing nonconformity with no change. Where we're picking up, where we're adding landscaping in the front, getting that little bit of additional concrete on the side for that parking space, it's a net 0 change. So like I said, it would not be a variance. But then also, I would say equally or more important is it takes our front landscaping and makes it compliant. We are now at 60%. So on a beachfront property like this, oceanfront property, the meaningful landscaping is in the front yard. Nobody sees the other landscaping. That is what allows this property, or will allow this property to be maintained as a beautiful property. So we think that that change, while it might seem minor, we think it's a dramatic improvement. And as I said, as I just went through them, it eliminated 5 of the variances that are in the zoning chart. So what does that leave us with? It leaves us with a bunch of, again, existing nonconformities that because we're taking the building up, they then become variances because we are higher than we would be otherwise permitted based on the way the ordinance is written. So as was already pointed out, because we are not proposing to park under the building, we're not taking the building up to 9 feet like most folks do, or even in new construction. What most folks do is they take advantage of your section of the ordinance that says, if you take your house up 9 feet above grade and use it for parking and storage, you can start measuring your height from there, and your finished floor can be 9 feet above the ground. Our client is choosing not to do that because he wants to preserve the layout and the integrity of the house. So he is bringing it up to comply, but he is then hamstrung with the lower of the 2 options, which means he is allowed to go 3 feet above base flood to the bottom of his joist, which essentially is 4 feet above base flood for his finished floor. That means the maximum finished floor elevation he can have here, based on that standard, is elevation 14. He's proposing to be at 16.71. So how do we balance that? How do we justify it? How do we prove to you that it's an appropriate request? Now, I mean, you heard Mr. Lear's reasoning behind it. Obviously, he wants to get his home out of harm's way as much as he possibly can. Certainly, he wants to be able to take advantage when his home comes up to better views. But we think that the request is very well justified given what your ordinance does permit by way of a building that technically could be, if you utilize the parking underneath standard, could be 1.29 feet higher than what we actually propose. But I think also very important, and Mr. Richmond was talking about it, Mr. Galantino weighed in on it, and you're going to hear a lot more about this as time goes on. The DEP has issued published new proposed rules. They are intended to be adopted next summer. Whether that'll happen or not, nobody really knows. And the language in the rules right now are potentially subject to change. But the current rules, the way that they read is that they've instituted a definition, something called climate-adjusted flood elevation. And what that means is that in every community, you take your flood maps that you guys are used to seeing, you take the base flood elevation that's on the map for that location. In this case, our base flood elevation is 10, and you add 5 feet to it. That then becomes your flood elevation. So in this location, we'd be at 10 plus 5, we'd be at 15 with our climate-adjusted flood elevation. The state then, as per the proposed rules, requires another 12 inches of freeboard on top of that. Now, whether communities will have more freeboard than that will, I guess, eventually be their decision if and when these rules are published. But based on the way the rules are currently written, this building would be required to have a finished floor of elevation 16 on this site. It wouldn't be, so the way your ordinance is written now, wonderfully, the decision to put in your ordinance about allowing buildings to go to 9 feet above grade to get parking underneath, turned out to be a tremendous thing, because those buildings that have been built that way, they're all going to be compliant with the new regulations because of where those floor elevations came out. But buildings that have chosen to not go as high as they are able to by utilizing that standard and just go to the finished floor plus 3 to the underside of the joist, those buildings will all become non-compliant when this regulation is passed. So just put into perspective for Mr. Lear's situation, if he did not ask for this variance and he builds at 14 because he doesn't want the building to be sky high, he builds at 14, eliminates the variance, and he finishes this winter, and the rules pass next summer. If he wants to renovate his house 10 years from now, and he's a substantial renovation, he'd have to raise it again because he's non-compliant, because of the fact that the rules have now put him into non-compliance. It's a real thing. It's really coming down the pike, and it's something that is going to need to be dealt with in the future, in my opinion. But fortunately, when we actually analyzed this project after the fact as compared to those rules, because they were only published, actually, they've been talking about them for, 2 years, 3 years? But they only actually finally released something we can read, what, Roger, a month ago now?
About a month.
Yeah. So, obviously it's become a major topic in our industry to study these and make sure we understand them for our clients. Fortunately, what Mr. Lear developed as a proposed plan fits right into it because it puts him at 16.71 feet. It would comply with those standards as they're currently written. It would comply with your ordinance. And what we think is super important is we don't believe that it causes a negative impact to any of our surrounding properties. So how can I say that? Well, first of all, you have brand new construction immediately next to us. That person chose to push their building back. They do have high decks, but they're set back because they're proposing what appears to be a pool in the yard between the bulkhead and the.
I'm going to stop you for just 1 second, John. If everyone can turn to the next page on the photographs, you'll actually see a photograph of the next door new construction project. That way they can just put eyes on it as you're discussing it, please.
So they're proposing to put a pool in the yard. So they're set back so far that honestly, even though our deck is going to the bulkhead at a higher elevation that's permitted, view blockages because of where their decks are set back are essentially our house. I mean, that's the way that property has been developed. Going across, I'll say across Argyle Avenue, if you visited that, it's an older home. I assume it will be reconstructed at some point in the future. But right now, if you visit that property, there's 3 or 4 evergreen trees that are 20 plus feet high, blocking any views right along this area. And the proposal of having this house at this elevation and these decks at these elevations is not inconsistent with this neighborhood either. If you go down just one property across Andover Avenue, you have a very similar scenario where you have, in their case, second-level decks that go out to the bulkhead.
And John, I'm going to stop you one more time. So
Sure.
just to confirm, if you could look at pages 5, 6, and 7 in the packet?
Yep.
Those show the new construction next door to the Lear residence, is
That's
that right?
correct, yes.
And it looks like it kind of towers over it. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, the building does look considerably higher, yes.
Okay, and then if you look at pages 8 and 9, can you tell the board what we're looking at there?
That's the streetscape. I mean, it shows some of the mass of the houses that are on this block, and that's one of the things, some of the newer homes that are constructed. That's one of the things that Mr. Lear's trying to avoid with this house raise by keeping the architecture of this property as it is.
Okay, I'm going to bring you back to pages 10 and 11 of the photographs. What are we looking at here?
That's the home I was just discussing that's immediately adjacent to us on Andover Avenue.
So that's the next door neighbor where they're building that pool and it's kind of set back?
That's correct.
Okay. And I've lost count. What was it on 11? 12, 13, and 14, I believe. What are we looking at in this photograph?
12, 13, and 14 are the home that I just mentioned on the other side of Andover Avenue as you would be heading toward the north, of the home that has decks that are similar in nature to what is being proposed here.
And this is the next street over from the Lear property?
That's correct.
And it kind of shows, I think there's first and second floor decks on a lot of these properties that go right to the bulkhead. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, so what is being proposed here is not inconsistent.
All right, thank you.
And just another quick discussion topic. We did look at potential options on different deck elevations. And the issue is, if you were building new construction, in all likelihood, you wouldn't set your house wall 9.4 feet from your property line. You'd move the house back, like the neighbor is, to have more yard space, because the beauty of these oceanfront properties is the outdoor living. Because he's proposing to preserve the property or the building, his decks are relatively narrow in depth. So if you look at, okay, maybe we put a landing in to try to get down to lower the deck, anywhere you put a landing really does have a pretty dramatic impact to the usability of that deck. So that's why we are requesting to have it maintained basically at the finished floor height. It's one step down from the finished floor onto that deck structure.
You mentioned two things earlier that I want to circle back to. The first is parking. We initially proposed 2 spaces, and now we're proposing a third. Is that right?
There are 3 spaces proposed which complies with the standards.
Okay, great. And the crawl space, how tall is that going to be?
So the crawl space, and this is another important part of the raise process, because obviously there's a substantial benefit here by eliminating a building that did have loss and making it fully compliant with regard to current FEMA standards and hopefully future standards. The current crawl space is actually a below-grade crawl space, so right now it actually, if you do get floodwaters in there, the floodwaters are held in the crawl space. That will be filled up. A slab will be constructed, typical at-grade slab will be constructed to comply with FEMA standards. And then the crawl space area is proposed to be, I believe, 5 feet 10 inches clear. The elevation, it all ties back to all the reasons for why they chose the dimension that they did. The 5 feet 10 is certainly never going to be a usable space. You don't have to worry about it being finished. But it's a nice step to be able to actually get in there and have some space for storage. So there was a lot of thought given into what looks like a random number of 16.71, but there was a lot of thought put into it. It was to have that 510 elevation and all the other things you heard Mr. Lear already discuss.
And Mr. Barnhart, is there anything else you want to tell the board before we get to the criteria for the grant of a C variance?
So the only other technical topic that I wanted to discuss is with regard to the bulkhead. The Lears are proposing elevation 15, which I don't technically think is a variance. The way the ordinance is written, I believe that Roger has the ability to make that decision on a case-by-case basis. Is that right?
We just adhere to the minimum requirement.
Okay. So just to understand it, the reason for the 15, if you look at the photos in the one package that you have there that show the beach, what has taken place here, Mr. Lear described to us, and it is what the city did for many years, is the city typically, or for many years, would go along and take the sand away from the bulkheads. In this area, they have not been doing that. And with the dune that's there in front of it, what has started to occur, which this does happen behind larger dunes, is what they call a secondary or tertiary dune. You can see the grasses there in front of Mr. Lear's property.
And which photos are you referring to? Is it pages 3 and 4 of the packet, A1? Let's see, that's 2, 3.
It's in 2 and 3 and 4. Yeah.
Thank you.
So that tertiary dune is going to, and if you visited the site, you'll see that in some areas the sand not right up against the bulkhead, but this area is actually, the sand is actually already higher than the bulkhead, and then in other areas it's lower. But because of the way that's developed, that's going to continue to build because those grasses are what capture the sand. So the concern that Mr. Lear has about sand washing over and or blowing over onto his property is going to become more and more real as time goes on. So from my perspective, at this specific location, the elevation 15 for his bulkhead does make a lot of sense. Obviously for future storm protection, but also protection from what's taking place in front of his site.
You talking about in front of his house or the street end?
I'm talking about on the beach in front of his house. If you look at those couple pictures, Rich, you see how they're starting to develop. It's what they call a secondary or tertiary dune right here.
No, I understand. I thought you were talking about the street end. Would you address the street end?
Address it in what regard?
Why you're going 2 feet above the municipal requirements
For the bulkhead here?
on the street end?
Well, I mean, that can still be open to discussion. I'm not, whether,
Well, he said you were going to talk about it, so talk about it.
So question is, are you going just across his property to the street? Or are you going across the complete street? Because the street end to us means you're going across the entire street, John.
You're going to the curb line.
Yeah, so, hold on.
So
Let me give us one
it looks
second.
like it's the curb line here.
okay, so I just want to make sure that I was clear on what my client was proposing here. What he's proposing is, assuming he's fortunate enough to receive an approval, and not that these two are tied together, but assuming he is fortunate enough to receive an approval and moves forward with this project, he would like to build the bulkhead along his frontage, property line to property line at 15. He is also proposing to build the Argyle Avenue street end, rebuild it, both for flood protection and beautification. If you don't want that raised to 15 and you want it at 13, he's perfectly happy with that as
So
well.
we're gonna replace the street end, and you can do 15 or 13. So let's put it into perspective, so we all know what we're talking about. The existing bulkhead there is about,
11.
11 feet.
it's 11 feet above. But from the street, it's only about up to my thigh. It's not tall.
Oh, no, it's not.
It's very low.
Right.
And because the ground, because the,
Are you talking about if you're standing on the sand, or are you talking about from the
I'm
street?
talking about standing in the blacktop
On the street.
on the
Yeah,
street.
Yeah, okay, yeah, thigh
So-
or waist, yeah, I agree with that.
When you say 15 feet, we're all right away saying, oh my God, you're gonna have a wall of bulkhead.
No,
But
no,
we're
no,
not. It's gonna be probably not more than as tall as I am,
Yeah.
or as tall as Mike is.
The existing bulkhead, we shot the elevation of, the existing top of the bulkhead that's out there now is like 11.1. So if you only want the street end bulkhead to go to 13, it's only going up 24 inches from where it is right now. And that's what your standard is 13.
Right, but in another year, it's gonna be 15, and then the city's gonna be on the hook to redo the bulkhead. It's
Yeah,
silly
and
for
our
us
client's
to-
willing to do 15 for the whole thing, if that's,
And then we're done. And the 15 is not gonna be overbearing
Right.
because it's gonna be,
Because the ground's high.
because.
Yeah.
The ground's at 9.
What's the height going to be at 15 feet from the blacktop?
Probably about 5.5 feet.
Yeah, what is it
6 to
now?
7 feet.
What is the bulkhead now?
man, let me grab my glasses.
It's at 11.5.
No, from the street.
From the street, it's about,
You said up to your
2
knee.
foot, yeah, it's about my thigh.
Hang on, I have some grades on the asphalt on my plan, I just can't read them. So, at the street end, the center line at the street, right near the street end is like 8.5. So, if you go to 15, you're looking at it 6.5 feet high.
The new one will be,
If you go to 15,
it'll be 6.5
it'd be
feet
6.5
high.
feet high.
So then, hopefully, under public content, we can ask the neighbors, who it's gonna affect the most, besides the city, whether that bothers them.
Well, it affects everybody.
I know.
It just, I'm just raising a point here.
Yeah.
It doesn't, there's no more storm protection for the city since every other bulkhead being raised is going to 13 feet. So it's not providing any more, the bulkhead next to it's going to be 13, so. Now you're
Why
having a
at the
bulkhead that you can't see over.
You're talking about at the street end.
I'm talking the street end, not in
Yeah.
front of his house.
Yeah, no, that's
I'm
what,
talking about the
Mr.
street
Lear,
end.
that's what Mr. Lear and I just discussed.
Yeah.
If you think 13 is the right number for the street end, he's perfectly happy to do it that way.
It
Rich,
might
the
go
only
up in the
difference,
future, but all the bulkheads now are being built to 13 feet, and they're gonna last 100 years, so it's gonna be 13 feet.
For a while.
And you're gonna have bulkheads now that you can't see over, like Rumson Avenue.
Yeah,
and I think
Rumson's
it's-
low, so it looks like it's.
I understand, and it's not gonna be that high, but it's still gonna be higher than me.
So, Rich, are you saying that it would be better at the 13
I'm saying leave it
At
at
the
the city
street.
requirements.
and
For
Rich,
the
if it-
street end.
for the
For the
street
street
end?
end, not,
For the, right.
just the
right.
street end, not in
Yeah,
front of his
But
house.
Rich, if it was left at 13 for the street end, and we were talking about flood water, I would agree with you. But we're talking about sand, and then that sand is gonna have to be cleaned up by the city. If he's willing to pay to get it to 15 for 2 feet, it's not doing anything. You can't even see the beach from with the dune in the way anyway.
And I can hear the public comments now about this giant bulkhead.
Again, I think the new bulkhead in the street end is up to the city's governing body.
Yes, Mr. McLaren, that's exactly what I was about to say.
Yeah.
My understanding is that's
And-
within the purview of the governing body.
So the height of the street end is up to them.
And then putting a bulkhead there. They have to agree to it.
I think it's, I
And
think with
it's
the app,
something to consider is, you know, you raise this bulkhead 4 more feet, you're adding like 8 more steps,
Yes.
you know, to get over it.
Yes.
You still have to have ADA compliance.
Yeah, this
I think
location has an ADA
Yeah, it does.
access now.
on the other
Right.
sidewalk, right.
Correct, yeah.
So I would say, you know, if he wants to go to the curb line, I don't see the city balking at that. But there's also electric tied to the bulkhead and some other items, but I think the jurisdiction of this board is for this property only.
Right.
I wouldn't even tie a condition of approval of this based on the bulkhead installation.
We raised the issue because it's part of
Right.
our overall plan to raise and increase the height of the bulkhead. And my
Right.
client's willing to do the street end, which he doesn't have to do. It's basically it's the city's responsibility, but he's willing to foot that expense. And it would have to be built in accordance with the city engineer specifications. The governing body would have input. I'm sure they would turn to this board for input as well, and members of the public. So, you know, we're not trying to say it has to be 15 or has to be 13 on the street end.
Right.
We just want you to know that's something that we're proposing to do as part of this overall package.
And I see the logic behind that because you have the
yes, I think,
velocity zones not too far away at 13, so you have 3
Yeah.
waves, 20 feet away.
yeah, the only question is if approved, do we even make it a condition or we just tell the applicant, look, you can approach the city and say, well, we want to put a
I'd say the-
bulkhead in and
The condition is they have to approach the city.
just approach the city and wherever that takes it, takes
Well,
it.
we could do it at 13 feet too, as a condition.
The governing body might want
City
15.
wants to raise it.
Right.
I would do that because then it's said and done, because we're gonna need a new bulkhead there anyway. It's pretty bad shape.
Well-
And it's only gonna protect your property, the whole block. Absolutely.
So again, like I said at the outset, it benefits my client, it benefits the neighbors, it benefits the taxpayers, and that's why we raise it. But if you don't want to make it a condition of approval, you know, I understand that.
I
And
would-
we'll have to go to the governing body.
I
as
would
well.
say we make it a condition of approval at the 13 feet, and if the
Yes.
commission wants to make it 15, that's up to them. It's gonna benefit Mr. Lear tremendously if it goes to 15, no matter what anyway. So he's not gonna object.
No, we would have no objection to
Is
that.
that good, guys?
I think the
You said
condition
stay at
should
13.
be, I mean, they have to go to 13 anyway. The city would have to go to 13 anyway.
Right.
Yes.
The condition I say is they approach the city. That's the condition.
And we'd be fine with that as well.
Okay. And we tell them they're going to 15, does the city want to go to 13 or 15?
It really is up to them, I think,
Right.
because it's not our property. He's just willing to do that because it's kind of ties into
Right.
it.
If they're willing to make it a condition, then we guarantee it's gonna get done. What's the big deal? And then the city would only go to 15 anyway.
But you're tying the city's bulkhead, which we have no jurisdiction over.
It's not part
To
of
the
the
project.
property line.
But the existing bulkhead that he's gonna raise to 15 feet is city's. The city owns it, he owns no bulkhead. So we're gonna take and give him 15 feet all the way to Argyle Avenue, which everything's attached to, and then say the last part, that doesn't make sense, Roger. Just put it through the whole thing and let the commission work it out.
It doesn't make sense. I don't understand.
The bulkhead that we're giving him approval for,
Right.
he doesn't own.
His own? Okay.
He doesn't own it, the city owns it.
Well, it's on the property, so that it's a joint, I would say the city would say he owns it.
Yes.
It's kind of like.
The city's not going to replace
He
it, so.
doesn't own it. The city would have to deed it to him.
We don't know who owns this bulkhead that's in front of his property.
Yeah, and I might have misspoken earlier. When I was saying this, that's owned by the city, I meant the street end.
Right, the
I
street.
thought that
I
his
agree.
bulkhead was owned
No,
by,
I agree.
okay. I just want to make sure I didn't
The
confuse you.
bulkhead straddles the property line.
Right.
It's partially on the private property and partially on the public property, which is
But there's a
pretty
difference
common.
between,
I mean, it's that way on a lot of properties.
but there's clearly a,
Let's put it this way.
The city has a
Yeah,
vested
exactly.
interest in that bulkhead for the whole property.
Right. Well, the city's not going to go in there and replace the bulkhead in front of his house.
No.
That's not going to happen.
That's not what I'm saying, but we can make it and put it in there, and then if they wanna take it out, they can take it out.
But for Argyle Avenue.
For the end street, it's one whole bulkhead. Why would you come across and stop and leave an old piece of junk?
But you
bulkhead?
can't tie it to this project. You can't.
I don't see why you can't. We do it all the time.
Just because a person wants to pay
Because
for
it's
it,
not enforced, if the city says we don't want to do it, then
you know?
you have a condition that
They
says,
can't
put a
let-
bulkhead in on the
can't get a
street
building
end.
permit?
Saying, let the city pay for it and not him.
That's not what we're
You
saying.
just said.
That's not what we're
It
saying.
needs repair.
My client
The city
intends to
will
do that
repair.
fully if the city will approve it.
Eventually.
Oh, my God. You guys don't make sense.
Recommendation is approach the city, and I'm sure that the governing body will participate.
I don't see why they wouldn't, frankly.
Right.
It's a considerable expense. We've gotten some estimates, I think
Right.
350, 375 for this.
I just don't want it to say it's a condition of approval, and I say no, then you can't get a building permit because it's a condition of approval.
Yeah.
Right.
I understand the concern. We also don't want to make it look like a quid pro quo, because that's not the intent. We're just telling you what we plan to
Exactly.
do and what we're willing to do. So we're fine with that, whatever you recommend, certainly.
Okay.
Mr. Barnhart, is there any other technical information you want to convey to the board before we get to the C1 and C2 criteria?
No, I think we've fully described the project.
Okay. In your professional opinion, does this proposed project satisfy the criteria for either a C1 and/or C2 variance?
Yes, I think, to an extent, I think you can justify this under the C1 hardship criteria. Certainly, this is not an exceptionally narrow or shallow lot, but if you read all the way through the standards in the C1, it talks about unique circumstances. So we have a set of circumstances where we want to preserve the existing architecture of the building, we want to bring it up exactly where it sits, but because of the way the law was written, you can only go to a maximum of 3 feet before all those things become variances. That puts us into this situation. But I think the more appropriate standard here is the C2 standard, where the benefits of the deviation outweigh the potential detriments. Obviously, we are taking a building that is currently not flood compliant. We are making it fully flood compliant. We are preserving the aesthetics of a building that's been in existence for a number of years and provides some real character to this neighborhood. We are proposing new flood protection for our own property, as we just discussed at length. And we are doing all of that in a manner that we don't believe creates a negative to any of the surrounding properties. Obviously, from the negative perspective, is there a substantial detriment to the zone plan? Our zoning ordinance, I described in detail what our finished floor height is versus what it is permitted to be if we were to be parking underneath of it. It's actually 1.3 feet lower than it would be permitted to be if we were parking underneath of the building. I also described the standards that are coming down the road from the DEP, and that thankfully puts this proposal right in line or in compliance with those standards. And all the setbacks that we're asking for, if you look at them, many of them are very near compliance, even though they are existing nonconformities. I think the only real non-compliance is along the ocean front, which we've discussed at length.
John,
Yes, sir.
If you're just raising the house and the height is measured from the finished first floor, why is that getting bigger?
It's not.
You're going from 30 to 31
So
for height.
the dimension, based on Mr. Ovalence's plans, the dimension between the finished floor and the roof peak is 28.94 feet. So the house is
It
not,
says the building height's going to go from existing 30 to 31.65. But you're measuring from the finished first floor, which is being lifted up. Why would that
Yeah,
increase by?
yeah, Roger, those numbers?
Yeah, there was some confusion on that also. So what is the distance from the first floor elevation to the roof peak?
The distance from the finished floor to the roof peak, based on Mr. Ovalence's numbers on his plans, is 28.94 feet.
That's not changing.
That is not changing.
That's not a variance then.
Okay.
Well, it says it's 30.1.
Is that on the schedule on Mr. McLaren's report?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I'm
that
just-
was
I'm
on
doing the math from Mr. Ovalence's. If you look at the finished floor elevation versus the roof peak elevation, it comes out to 28.94.
It's not changing?
It is not changing.
Okay. It shows it's changing on here, so.
Okay.
A variance was requested, so I put it in the chart, and I was trying to look at that also. If you're going the extra height for the floor, that's not a variance.
Yeah, the house is just, in its position, it's just going up.
That's not what it says. That's
Understood.
my question.
Yep, that was a good
Okay.
question, understood.
And Mr. Barnhart, I think you covered this, but just to be a stickler for the exact language for purposes of any, the record and any potential appeal.
Sure.
Is it your professional opinion that this variance could be granted without causing substantial detriment to the public good?
Yes, I described the surrounding properties and the consistency with the development pattern of those properties. So for those reasons, we believe there is no substantial detriment to the public good. And I also believe that by cutting back the front decks on Argyle Avenue, there is actually a benefit to this neighborhood.
And is it also your professional opinion that the granting of this variance would not substantially impair the intent and purpose of the municipal zone plan and ordinance?
Yes, for all the reasons I've already stated, yes.
Thank you.
Just to tie into that comment real quick is, one of the new mandates from the state in recent year or two is any new master plan, not a re-exam, but any new master plan has to have a resiliency component as part of it. This is a perfect example of a resiliency project. Would you agree to that, John?
Yes,
If that was
100%.
part of our master plan, you're meeting that.
Correct, and I think, as I said, I don't want to call it lucky, but as the new regulations came out, the new proposed regulations came out, every project we're doing now, we are comparing what the client wants to do to those standards. And it just so happened that this works exactly with what is being currently proposed. So we were thankful that we didn't have to revisit some of these numbers.
You done?
That concludes our presentation, unless there's any more questions.
Okay. Anything from the board?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. So front yard landscape coverage now is no longer a variance, you're
That's
compliant.
correct.
Total coverage, do you know what the number is now for?
Total landscape coverage, right now, it exists at 20%.
Yeah.
If you look at our plan, we were actually dropping it to 18%.
Yeah.
But we increased some of the landscaping area, so it's a net, no difference.
No difference.
So
Keeping it at 20.
It's 20 now, it's going to be 20.
But the front yard's increasing to 60,
Correct,
which is what you see.
exactly.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I
Go
have
ahead.
to follow it up though.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of concrete there on that. Was there any consideration to do anything to reduce the concrete, to have additional permeable surface and maybe some recharge, you know?
So, as far as, I don't disagree with you, but, we've got, this is all parking, obviously.
Yeah.
The only area you could pick it up would be, like, I guess maybe you could take some of this walkway out in the back, but that's how you get around.
No permeable paver consideration or anything like that?
We could certainly, have another conversation with our client about it.
We'll vote on what is in front of us. Okay, thank you.
What is
That's all I got.
recharge?
Allowing penetration of water into the soil.
Okay, so isn't that what grass does?
Concrete doesn't. For a little bit when it rains,
Right,
then it runs right off.
right. So what do you do to recharge?
You can put a recharge system in where you have like a stone bed that's deep, where
Right.
you store water,
Okay,
allows it to penetrate the soil.
okay,
So it basically gives you a vertical distance where you don't have the horizontal.
okay.
It's another way to reduce runoff.
All right, so actually, I can give you one benefit. Just talking to our client. Currently, the walkway back here is actually individual paver stones.
On top of sand.
Yeah, so, like I said, we netted out to have no change in coverage, but we can actually improve upon it by keeping that as paver stones on sand, so it's individual stepping stones. So, I don't have the exact number, but that will go a long way to help provide additional pervious areas in the back, so we have less runoff, potentially from our neighbors.
Great,
And we would make that a condition of approval as well, if
okay,
you want.
good. Anybody else from the board?
Done.
We're good? Okay. Anyone from the public like to speak? Go ahead.
Just give us your name and address, please, and I'll swear you in.
Yes, my name's Jeffrey Shalale. I live at 104 South Argyle.
Mr. Shalala, please raise your right hand. You swear affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, many of us have grown up in Margate. I was fortunate to grow up on Andover Avenue, on the beachfront. And I remember I was either in my teens or early 20s when this house was first built. And I thought it was beautiful back then, really spectacular. It was an unusual house. And I live on Argyle now. It still is beautiful. And when I heard that Seth Lair was willing to raise the house, that was his proposal, as opposed to tearing it down and building a much larger, taller structure, I felt glad. And I think that Margate will benefit from his desire to raise his house rather than tear it down. And I think it adds to the beauty of Margate. So I support the proposal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Since Lloyd Levinson, 107 South Argyle, since I am really the one most impacted.
Mr. Levinson, you're not representing the client, right?
No.
Swear to tell the truth?
No. Yes.
Thanks. Go ahead.
Yes. So I've spoken to Seth. He's shown me the plans. It is just going up, and as I understand it, it's not going to affect my house whatsoever.
Are you directly next to him?
Directly next to him, yeah. I'm the second house from the beach. He's on the beach. So it just goes up. If it went out, I'd be here objecting. So, but knowing that it's just going up has really no effect on my house. So I certainly, my family supports what he's trying to do here. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tammy Rosen. I live at 103 South Argyle.
And Ms. Rose,
One next to Lloyd.
Ms. Rosen, do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
I just want to say I grew up on the street. I also loved looking at that house. Was delighted that it's not being torn down and that it adds to the character and charm of Margate. And I think more people should be preserving the history and beauty of houses and not tearing them down. So I completely support this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, public portion is closed.
All right, if there's no other questions, it's a C variance application in connection with the house lift. The variances are as follows. There's a side yard setback on the right side to the house. 9.41 feet is proposed, 10 feet is required. The combined side yard setback to the house is at 21.33 feet, where 22 feet is required. Rear yard setback to the house is at 5.12 5.12 feet where 12.5 feet is required. The rear yard deck setback, 12.5 feet is required. They're at 5.5 feet plus or minus. The rear yard setback to the deck on the beach side, 12.5 feet is required. They're at 10.7 feet plus or minus. And the deck height of the beachfront deck is at 16.2 feet, where 11.67 feet is required. And in terms of the conditions, we'll note with respect to that street end, certainly not some sort of a quid pro quo, as Mr. Ballesteri said, but the applicant's the one who raised it, so we'll just say they'll go to the city and say we're willing to raise the street end bulkhead and see where that takes you. And then I'll note also towards the end of the presentations, there said there's some paver stones on sand along the rear property line that you'll leave. Is that
Instead of concrete.
instead of concrete? Okay.
Yes, those conditions are acceptable to us.
And then we'll just note the other standard conditions that we've pretty much put in every resolution, subject to any outside approvals that might be required, subject to any representations made by the applicant during the course of the hearing, and anything else in Mr. McLaren's report, unless otherwise addressed. And if I did not miss anything, we'll need a motion, a second, and a roll
Did
call
the
vote.
applicant, did you have something to say?
I was just going to say that the pavers, it's gravel around it that sits on sand, just to be very clear.
Right.
Okay.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Tom Collins?
Well, actually, John, you really did a nice job explaining the C1 and C2 criterion, and you did a nice presentation between both of you. I admire what you're doing, Mr. Lear. I think it's admirable. I agree with what John said, that C1 is marginal, but it is there, and it does have a hardship to a degree, especially when you're getting all the sand. And the C2 is, I think, the heavier variance, and it really is a benefit to the city. Anytime we improve our beachfront, our bulkheads, we should have more bulkheads and artificial reefs than we have dunes, but they're giving us dunes, and dunes just blow into our houses. I think this is a great project, and I vote in favor of it.
Richard Patterson.
I also commend Mr. Barnhart. I don't think I need to go through all the C1 and C2. I just agree with his presentation. I think he covered it very well, and I approve the project.
Michael Richmond.
Yeah, I think especially with the new rules that I'm about 100% certain are going to go into effect, that this house would would almost be variance-free except for a couple things. We're taking a classic house and we're raising it. If you look at the property next door, I'm sure it'll be a beautiful property, but it's like so, big and just overbearing. I can't not approve this. I approve it.
Stephen Giuseppe.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with the rest of the board members. I think it's a beautiful house. I think you present your arguments really well, and I'm in favor of it.
Michael Ruffey.
I want to kind of echo what the other board members said and commend the owner for doing, putting in the effort to keep the house the way it is. I think it's obviously rare in Margate, and I think we should again, everyone agrees that it's important for us to keep these older houses in Margate. But other than that, I really don't have anything to add. It's a great project, and I vote yes on it.
Margaret Gubernalty.
Yes, I want to commend presenters. I want to thank the applicant for preserving the aesthetic of the house. Certainly was the best option or alternative. The others were not as favorable. I see no negative impact to the neighborhood. I don't think it compromises our ordinances in any way. And I approve the application. Thank you.
John Pitts.
Yeah, I appreciate the effort to reduce the number of variances required. Job well done, and I approve.
Jim Galantino.
I approve the project. Anytime somebody wants to elevate their structure, I'm all for it. I think it's the best way to go moving forward with the state regulations. To never move, it's always a moving bar, it seems like. So hopefully it stops at some point. I approve the project.
Craig Palmisano.
Yes, most of the variances are all existing nonconformities for the raise. And I'm glad you cut the front deck back some and added more landscaping in the front of the house. That looks nice. A nice job, John Barnhart, and you too. And it's more flood-proof for the next storm if it ever comes. And you're saving an older home, and that's really what we try to do on this board a lot. We try to save those older homes. Sometimes we succeed, and sometimes we don't. I approve this project, and I'm happy for you.
The application is approved with 9 in favor and 0 opposed.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, Okay, our next case is Michael and Stephanie Scatolini, 8 South Gilmore Circle, blocks 609.03, lot 61, located in the S40 zoning district, seeking C variance relief for front yard setback, side yard setback, and potentially others in order to raise the existing home and construct a second floor. Current on taxes, water, and sewer payments, proof of advertising and notifications provided, represented by Christopher M. Valenson.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members. report is based on the application of Michael and Stephanie Scatolini, 8 South Gilmore Circle, Block 609.03, Lot 61, located in the S40 zoning district. They're in FEMA zone elevation 8, so in essence, the required first floor is elevation 11 to the bottom of the floor. This is another house lift, and due to the state limiting house raises to BFE +3, variance is required for existing non-conforming standards, as the board is well versed after the prior application. No need to go in that any further. Deemed complete, and this could be somewhat of a hardship issue there is a curvature in the front of the property. And so your front yard setbacks are staggered because that line moves. But it's essentially a potential benefit variance. The zoning schedule is on page 2 and 3, highlighting the variances. Again, some of these have been, I just want to go over the fence location across the driveway. As long as the parking is being met, that would not be a variance, but it also means that the garage is not being used for parking anymore, which leads to another variance. So documents reviewed on the bottom of page 3. Page 4 are the plans reviewed, and let's go over the variances required. Front yard setback to the deck. Resident minimum front yard setback based on the average within 200 feet is 18.58. 22.65 feet exists, and 16.15 feet is proposed. That's for the first and second floor decks that are being proposed. Side yard setback to the building on the left, whereas the minimum side yard setback is 8 feet, 5 feet exists, and 5 feet is proposed. Probably when the house was developed and constructed, 5 foot was the norm. Side yard setback to the first floor deck, again, similarly to the building, 8 feet is required and 5 feet is proposed. Same thing for the second floor deck on the left, 8 feet is required, 5 feet existing and proposed. Actually, the second floor deck is just proposed. Fence location, again, if parking is being met, that's really not a variance, but it leads to the other variance where accessory structure detached garage. We allow 9 feet extra to allow parking underneath, and the ordinance says you can't have both. If you already meet the parking, you can't lift the house to have parking. So the detached garage would have to be demolished, or they can seek a variance for the oversized accessory structure, which I believe they're going to request that tonight. And the driveway curb cut width, they're allowed 18 feet. They're proposing 24 feet. It's my understanding that that variance may be going away also. So basically, they're adding a second floor, they're lifting it up, and because they're raising the house, that kind of drives these variances. I'm not going to go through all the comments. I'll leave it up to the applicant to address the comments and the variances. Chris?
Thank you, Mr. McLaren. Members of the board, my name is...
Can I ask a question real quick? Sorry. If they wanted, would they be allowed to do a shed, like an 8x10 shed?
They could.
They could, okay.
2.
So they could do 2?
Need 2.
Even though you have parking underneath? Okay, that's all I wanted to know. Go ahead.
Thank you, members of the board. My name is Chris Balance, and I represent Stephanie and Michael Scatolini, who currently live at 8 South Gilmore Circle, Lot 61, Block 609.05. This is what Roger explained. It's a house lift of the existing rancher at that location, for primarily to give the Scatolinis more room to accommodate their family. And I'm not going to tell the story as to why they're expanding the house. Circumstances are unfortunate, and I'll let Stephanie explain it, if you don't mind. You need to be sworn.
Yeah, Ms. Scannellini, just give us your name and address for the record.
Stephanie Scatolini, 8 South Gilmore Circle.
Okay, Ms. Scannellini, please raise your right hand. Do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
So we're moving down here to help with my niece, who's 7, and my nephew, who's 9. My sister passed away in 2020 suddenly from a heart issue. Their father's not really involved, so my mom has residential custody, and she lives on Thurlow. So for the past few years, we've been coming down Thursday through Monday to help my parents raise the children. And then my husband and I have a 3-year-old and a little boy coming in 25 days-ish. So we'll then have 2 or 4 kids, however you see it. So it's a 3-bedroom rancher, and we have a dog and the 2 of us, so it's a little tight. We both work in PA. I work at Shop King of Prussia. My husband works in Bala Cynwyd. So we're moving down here. And when it's done, we'll sell our Cherry Hill home to be down here full time. My parents are, my mom's here, 68 and 72. I grew up in Margate, so want to be here to, as their only surviving child, to take care of them as they get older, and the kids as well. My niece and nephew go to Ross School. I went to Union Ross and Ty. My daughter goes to Playgroups Plus with Janet. And we just love the circle, we all walk each other's dogs, the neighbors help with our kids, so we want to stay on the circle versus moving somewhere else.
Okay, your niece and nephew have been here since your sister passed?
Yeah, they were in Margate schools before they passed, and then, before she passed, and then my mom just has residential custody officially now.
And you guys moved here permanently, but you also continue to commute back to Philly or to that area for
For work, yeah.
And the second floor obviously is a necessity for just
The number of
room for 4
children.
kids.
Yeah, the 4 children, and my husband and I, so we'll all be upstairs, and then if my parents and things. for
Now,
them.
if the board would allow it, would you, the garage door's off-center, as I understand it. It kind of makes it difficult to use it for a car.
Yeah.
You don't use it for a car anyway. I think Chris
No.
has some pictures of how you use it. You use it for bikes, beach stuff.
Yeah,
things like
bike
that.
strollers, yeah,
And
the
you'd
lawnmower.
You'd agree that that would be how it would continue to be used?
Yes.
And eliminate the driveway right in front of it with some play areas, some grass area,
Yeah.
so it doesn't appear like it's a garage with a driveway into it.
Right.
And you'll have 2 parking spaces in front of the fence, but you would like to keep the fence across that top portion of the driveway for kids, for dogs.
Yeah, so
you-
they can, be
you know,
contained.
You're gonna have 4 little ones under 5
Yeah.
or 6 years old?
Well, yeah, but
Seven,
yeah,
6, 5?
yeah,
And that's just for safety factor to keep the kids.
yeah, yeah,
Thanks.
yeah, no problem.
Are you eliminating the driveway behind the fence?
Yes,
That'll be all landscape?
yes.
You know, that's not fair. How do we vote no for something? It's not fair.
That's why I don't tell the stories.
Yeah.
The variance is because the existing non-conforming setbacks are a result of getting the building high enough to park underneath. And the parking will be underneath. There'll be a car underneath in the garage, and there'll be 3 outside, 1 in the access to the garage, and then 2 in the existing driveway. The curb cut will be eliminated at 21 feet and brought down to 18 feet as conforming. We would ask that the application be amended to allow the oversized garage, and I'll provide dimensions as a condition, to act as a shed and not as a garage. And Chris can tell you that it is weird the way it's built. There's an undersized garage door to the one side. So it makes access to the garage and in and out very, very difficult. But even if it was normal, Chris will show you a picture, it's just filled with kid stuff. And you'd say, well, they also have storage underneath the house, but remember, it's about 1,000 square foot footprint. You're gonna have a car in there, and a foyer, and then you have some small storage area. And when you have 4 kids, and the beach, and surfboards, and bikes, and boogie boards, and whatnot, that storage space gets used up pretty quickly. We would ask the application be amended to allow them to keep the garage as an accessory structure, a shed, in light of taking it down and putting up 2 sheds.
I calculated 338 square feet
Okay, thank you.
For what?
for the existing garage.
Size of the garage.
338.
With that being said, I'll let Chris run through the house. He designed it, and take you through it as the architect.
Okay, Mr. Halliday, just give us your name and business address for the record, and I'll swear you in.
Great. Chris Halliday, registered architect, Halliday Architect, 728 West Avenue in Ocean City.
Okay, and please raise your right hand. Do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
I do.
Okay, and I know you've been before this board several times, or at least somewhat recently. We'll accept your credentials as an architect. Okay.
I've known him when he was like this big.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, can I just get the names of some neighbors who support the project into the record? I'm not going to read the letter, just that we have letters of support from neighbors. I'd at least like to get their name into the record, if that is permissible. Okay.
Well, is it?
Yeah, I don't have an objection to that.
The Phil Potts at 8 South Gilmore has submitted a letter in support. The Loretta Meredith at 21 West Gilmore has submitted a letter in support. Bernadette Bickle at 6 South, right next door, has submitted a letter in support, as has the Pitseys at 14 West Gilmore, a letter in support. Thanks. Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you. So the existing house is a 3-bedroom, kitchen, living room, small front stoop rancher. It's slightly under the freeboard requirement, about 9 inches below what's required for new intention is to raise the first floor, allow for parking underneath, and then remove one of the bedrooms on that first level to allow for stair and circulation, and then 4 new bedrooms for the growing family on the second level.
Chris, this obviously would be considered a substantial renovation.
It would be, yes.
So that 9 inches forces them up. Obviously, from a cost-effective standpoint, the 9 inches wouldn't be really worth it.
Correct.
To raise the house.
So, and this, I think Michael and Stephanie are in, they're starting their journey. So we're not building a super large home. We are kind of working with what we have currently and accommodating their needs, trying to give them as much usability as possible.
Footprint stays the same?
Yep, and they want to take pride in their home. We're trying to make it more aesthetically pleasing from front, add decks, add exterior space, and some nicer materials, including hardy shingles, standing seam metal roofs, and currently they don't have any deck space, so there's actually, in the summertime, if you drive by a lot, there's a patio out front of the house with an awning, and that's where they kind of use their outdoor space. So essentially, that patio is being raised and a deck is created. The patio does not count as it does not encroach into the setback because it's just concrete pad on grade.
But the front porch extension that you're speaking of, that's the only setback that's created as a result of this renovation, right? The others are existing nonconformities?
That's correct.
And that setback is going to be about 18.5 versus, I'm sorry, it's going to be 18.5 versus 16 that's required?
Correct. It's 16.1 where 18.7 is required.
And that additional 2 feet of that porch or that front deck, whatever it may be, that, you think that'll impact anybody on either side?
I don't. I think, especially because it's a circle, it's an odd block, so you're not looking straight down the block and seeing one home outbound of everyone else. It is on a radius, so.
And 8 South Gilmore is right at the top of the radius.
That's correct.
So everybody curves back from there.
That's correct.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Mr. Cornan mentioned that there is a variance in the documents for curb cut. That was not my intention. So the curb cut will go down to 18-foot permitted, so that variance will be removed.
And that'll be continuous?
Yes.
And access the existing driveway as well as the new garage access?
That's the intent.
You'll be taking the ribbon out, and you have 20 feet on the side of the house. If the ribbon was moved over, it'd be easier to get in and out of the driveway, a double driveway.
Right, coming this way.
Because there's 20 feet on that side of the house.
Right, modifying this
Yeah.
curb cut. The idea, after reading the report.
Because you are shrinking the curb cut.
Correct, yeah. So this will go down to 18, and then this will remove about 2% of landscape coverage by removing these strips.
Yeah.
We were not counting a parking space in this detached garage, so we do have conforming parking in front of the fence, 4 spaces. Removing that, allowing for yard space, that was the whole intention of the fence.
It's got an additional 20 feet of green space,
Correct,
yard space.
correct, yep. And the gate's there just because they're going to have 4 kids under 10, and they want some yard space. They're moving from Cherry Hill down here, so that's essentially acting as their backyard play area.
Yeah, the only thing I was saying was moving it together so that
Yeah,
it's easier to get in and out.
Continuous.
But yeah, agreed.
Yes, the curb cuts, yes. Yeah, I understand.
However functions best.
Yes, yeah, I agree with you. So we can modify those strips that go straight out and then bring them over.
Plenty of room to go closer to the house.
Correct. I assume with the raise, those strips are going to be replaced with the damage from construction. So we'll modify those so that parking will be a little easier.
And the 4 parking spaces conforms to what the ordinance requires?
Correct.
Can I, sorry.
Please.
I just want to know how many square feet do you have now, and how many square feet will the house be?
As far as,
About 1,200 to 2,400?
Just, it's 1,200 now?
yeah, it's 1,200 now, about 2,400 square feet total. We're less than the building coverage.
But you need it, yeah.
We're less in height than what's allowed by about 3 feet.
It's only 2 stories, right? Staying 2 stories?
2 stories, not 2.5.
Thank
So,
you.
a lot of the things, this was a study on how to achieve the goals, and the Scatolini's never came to me and said, we want to max it out. We want as much house as we want. They said, we love our house. We've been coming down here. We want to make it our year-round house, and to make it our year-round house, we need more space. We need more bedroom space. We need more storage.
So building coverage remains at 25% versus 30 that would be required?
Correct.
Would be permitted? So, Chris, what we've come down to is a variance for an oversized accessory structure, which would be the garage, correct?
Yes,
And the setback to the new porch,
the new deck, correct.
right, in front, which is about a 2-foot setback, and the existing nonconformities where there's 5 on the side versus 8 required.
That is correct. And we are removing a raised landing that is used for circulation now. That is about 1.8 feet from the side property line. So that's going to be removed because we don't use it anymore, obviously. So there is a little bit of relief there in that side yard.
Do you think then, under a C2 criteria and a C1 criteria for the front yard, that the project as a whole enhances the municipal land use law and the positive criteria?
I think we're preserving an existing structure. We're raising it above flood, well above flood. It should meet the new, per Mr. Bernhardt's discussion earlier, the new requirement for flood. Will be over that by
Resilient.
about 1 foot. And it does, a lot of master plans, front porches and decks are part of master plans in order to create community engagement and so that you can say hi to neighbors, which this is a great neighborhood, so that's another criteria.
And the aesthetic enhancement obviously goes a long way in Gilmore Circle.
I think it's a great neighborhood.
Do you think that the variance can be granted without substantial detriment to the public good?
I do.
And without substantial impact on the zone plan and zoning ordinance? That's all I have. Thank you.
Anybody on the board have any questions? Anybody from the public like to speak? Okay, public portion is closed.
Nothing further, thank you.
Okay. The board has nothing further. It's a C variance application for the house lift. The variances are front yard setback to the deck of 16.15 feet, where 18.58 feet is required. Side yard setback on the left side to the house of 5 feet where 8 feet is required. Same thing for the side yard setback to the first floor deck, 5 feet is proposed, 8 feet is required. And for the second floor deck on the left side, 5 feet required, 5 feet proposed, 8 feet is required. And then the other variance is for the size of the accessory structure. That detached garage is now going to become an accessory structure, and the area behind the fence is going to become a yard. And we'll just say for the size, Chris, it's oversized, but it'll stay for the as-is size.
Yes, correct.
And then,
The location of the fence will be such that there are 2 legal spaces in the driveway in front of it.
perfect. Okay, perfect. 2 legal spaces in front, and I'll note that as a condition. 2 legal spaces in front of the fence, in the driveway. The curb cut will conform, and then behind the fence, obviously, I think I noted that the driveway gets eliminated because it's behind a fence, and that gets rid of that fence location variance. And then the standard conditions, anything else in Mr. McLaren's report, subject to any outside approvals, and any representations made during the course of the hearing on behalf of the applicant. So
I'll make
that's-
that motion.
A second.
Tom Collins?
Chris, you did a nice job tonight, both Chris's. This is something that I've been preaching for a lot of years, is how do we get families back into Margate? And this is a perfect example. And without us having to do anything, you are coming in on a modest request. The hardship of that circle is the fact that you have a lot and you're in the middle and it curves around, so you lose a lot of ground. I live in a circle there too, one away, and it can be a benefit or it can be a detriment. What you're doing is very commendable, taking care of the children. It's a nice thing. So I vote in favor. I think it meets all the C1 and C-type 2 criteria that it needs to justify it.
Richard Patterson?
I've been pretty adamant about getting rid of garages when you put the parking underneath, but I think this is a unique situation, especially with the minimal size of the house and the fact that it could be so much bigger. I think that compensates for it, the fact that the house is so much smaller. I don't know how you're going to fit in a house at 2,400 square feet. So for those reasons, I don't, and the support of the neighbors, I see no negatives here. I vote to approve.
Michael Richmond?
I lived on Gilmore Circle. It's a great neighborhood. Yeah, we're raising a house. We're getting an flood elevation. We're bringing a family into Margate, which is, to me, one of the, like Tom said, in my mind, is one of the biggest things coming up in Margate, is just trying to get more families to move in and support the schools. So I think it's a great project, and I approve it.
Stephen Giesecke?
Yes, I'm going to have to agree with him. Once again, we do have families coming in and remaining in Margate, and I think it's a good, I think the benefits outweigh every detriment, so I approve.
Michael Ruffey?
I agree with the other board members about bringing good families into Margate again, and I wish you and your family the best of luck. I approve it.
Margaret Gubernalty?
I see this as a positive. We get a nice, pretty new house. I actually live in one of the ranchers as well.
Me too.
Yeah, you too. He lives next door to me. We get more green space. We get a flood compliant house. In terms of the accessory structure, I mean, the lot size is, it's 50 by 96-foot lot, so I don't see that as a detriment at all. Although it doesn't comply with our ordinance, I don't see it as a problem. There's no negative impacts, and I wish you the best of luck, and I approve.
John Pitts?
Yeah, nothing more to be said, really. I think the board members have said it all. I'm a neighbor around the corner of Huntington Avenue, so best of luck and welcome to town.
Craig Palmisano?
Yeah, more room for 4 little kids to run around the house and bring them to Margate. We like that, and I approve of it.
Jim Galantino?
Yeah, I think the detriment would have been if they did a substantial improvement and I told you you couldn't do it because you had to elevate your house. So you just proved your point. I approve the application.
The application is approved with 9 in favor and 0 opposed.
Very much.
2 minutes? Yeah. We're going to take a 5-minute break. Ready? Okay, here we go. Last case, Margate Burger LLC, 7903 Ventnor Avenue, Block 207.03, Lot 4, located in the CBD zoning district, seeking site plan approval along with C variance relief for parking and potentially other variances in order to construct a new building consisting of commercial on the first floor and residential above, current on taxes, water, and sewer payments, proof of advertising and notifications provided, represented by Christopher M. Balance.
Thanks, Mike. Raj, want me to start?
Please.
Members of the board, my name is Chris Balance, and I represent Margate Burger LLC, and its principal, Dr. Pastor, who is here with us this evening to work on the infamous property where the food truck burger bus exists between Frontenac and Franklin on Ventnor Avenue. It's 7902 Ventnor Avenue. It's in the CBD zone. A mixed-use building with residential and commercial is permitted, so long as commercial is on the first floor and residential is on the second floor and above. I had submitted a letter to Leo, to Mr. Manos, taking the position that Margate Burger should be entitled to rely on the ordinance that was in effect at the time their application was submitted in December of 2022. The reason being is as follows. The application was submitted in late December 2022, ultimately scheduled to be heard in April of 23. There was no quorum that evening, so the matter went off. 2 months later, on July 1st reading, August 2nd reading, Ordinance 10 of 2023 was adopted, which introduced wholesale changes to the CBD zone, which included primarily a 6-foot front yard setback on every front yard on any given block. Needless to say, and the density requirements for the residential were changed also. Needless to say, that in and of itself, with those setbacks, required a complete redesign of the project, which Dr. Pastor authorized and Peter did ultimately refiling this application, or refiling the revised plans just recently. The law provides, and Leo can help me, the law provides that when an ordinance is adopted during the pendency of an application that serves to kill that application, for lack of a better term, the law in effect at the time that the application was filed is what controls. Now, the only thing really that makes a difference for that application tonight is the setbacks. It's the only difference, really. The 6-foot setbacks, because on this property with 3 street fronts, there would be 3 6-foot setbacks. And that, however you look at it, is good or bad. I look at it and I'm take a personal problem with it. I think it's terrible. So with that brief introduction, I would give it to you guys to take a straw vote, or Leo, however you want to handle it. And I'm going to proceed either way. I'll ask for the variances. If you guys say no, allow the new ordinance, I'm fine with that. I just want that to be in the record, because technically, that's how this should be handled.
Yeah, just put it on your case, you gotta put it on anyway, the same way, and then we can, I mean, the law is clear. The law in effect when you file your application is the law that applies. What's a little unclear to me, just as a outside, some of the history, I mean, I remember the history, is this a filed was this application filed prior to the ordinance?
Was it filed or refiled?
Right.
If I remember correctly, this was pulled because we were waiting for the outcome of the Chinese restaurant, which you handled. Either way,
it was on the agenda
I
with.
think your better bet would be to present your case, seek your variances.
We're going to present it either way.
Yeah, my recommendation, at least initially, put on your case.
Okay.
The board should possibly, the application shouldn't hinge on whether it's a 0-foot setback or a 6-foot setback.
And I have good justification for the setback variances, and I understand that that's, the request is a little bit unusual, and I think I'm okay either way it goes. I just want the record to be complete. So Burger Bus will be demolished, and what is proposed is exactly what Margate has on the next block over, across the street, and down on this end, so to speak. What is proposed is a single building with inline stores on the sidewalk line on Venner Avenue, 3,300 square feet of commercial space, with 3 units above, 3 bedrooms each. Now, why is that important? That's important because, and those who count bedrooms, why, for whatever reason, understand that the density criteria that is in the old ordinance, so to speak, the density units per acre, that still is in effect. And on this property, there's more than 4 units that this property can accommodate. Okay? We're not doing that. We're not trying to squeeze 4 units in. It's 3 units, and the bedroom count, regardless of what it can or can't be, is only 3, which is what ended up at Billy Ho's, the Chinese restaurant, ended up to be. So where 4 units could be jammed on there, they are not being jammed on there. Dr. Pastor has said 3 units are fine and reduced them to 3 bedrooms. Now, those 3 units will be parked on site. Parking will conform, 2 and 2 for each unit, with 5 spaces left for the commercial. Let me suggest this. The commercial requires 17 spaces. The residential requires 6 spaces, 23 spaces. That's under our current ordinance. I'm going to suggest to you that you have a hard time building a building on that lot if you conform with parking. Turns into a parking lot.
You would lose commercial.
With that having been said, the significant variance tonight, I think, aside, parking is significant, but that, in terms of history, I think that's going to be okay, are the setbacks. We are not going to conform to the new 6-foot setbacks on the 3 street frontages. Why? Because if on a 125-foot lot across the front of Ventnor Avenue and 65 feet deep, if you do the math, you've just lost 1,300 square feet of retail space. And you've pushed the building back toward the houses. To me, in my formal language, that just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to lose that commercial space at all. The idea behind, and the idea is right, the idea behind the new front yard setback is to allow space in case you want to elevate your building for front steps or for a ramp, whatnot. John and Pete have come up with a design that doesn't require that. there is an internal, in the middle of the building, there's an opening, a corridor, so to speak, vestibule, that ramps up. So we are going to raise the building, consistent with the recommendations in the new ordinance to help with flood. The building's going to be 12 inches off the ground, and it's going to ramp up inside. So we
So
don't
you're
need.
putting the ramps inside instead of outside.
That's right. So we don't,
Yeah.
the reason for the setback is we don't need it.
Right.
And the reason that was introduced is to use it for a ramp, and we're putting the ramp inside, so we don't need it, and we would like to be consistent with everybody else. We don't want to be, non-conforming like every other building now is in Margate because of the setback requirements. So that's what the proposal is. It's an internal access to 3,300 square feet of retail space with 3 units above, 3 bedrooms each. They are all parked conforming. There's a variance for 12 parking spaces for the commercial, which is consistent with what this board has acted on in the past. I was going to go into the whole history of the new ordinance. I'm not going to do that. I'll save that for another day just because I just don't like it. But I think what we've come up with tonight is a great blend of the old ordinance and new ordinance by bringing this building up to the sidewalk line like is a consistent pattern, and the pattern still recommended by the master plan. Still to this day, through 4 master plans and reexaminations back to 2006, every single one says buildings should be on the sidewalk line at grade or within 12 inches of grade. That hasn't been changed yet, so anybody that looks for guidance in the master plan, that's what it says. We're asking for a height variance less than 10%, but I'll tell you, that really is to give us a small slope on the roof to give the building some character. And again, your master plan says that in the CBD zone, residential above should be full-size residential units, and consider giving a little additional height so it sets that area off from the rest of the city. That is the area that people will want to go to because of the size, shape, scope of the development. And we're trying to obviously use the additional height for the ceiling height inside, but also follow the master plan and its dictates. Let's have John and Pete sworn in, and we'll go from there.
Okay, Mr. Barnhart and Mr. Weiss, just give us your name and business address for the record. I'll swear the two of you in together.
John Barnhart, 400 North Dover Avenue, Atlantic City.
Peter Weiss, 38 East Oakcrest Avenue, Northfield.
Okay, and if you each please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
I do.
Yes.
And Mr. Barnhart is a planner and engineer. Mr. Weiss is an architect. We
Does
can
the board
accept.
accept those qualifications, Mr. Rick?
Yes.
Yes. John, you want to go through the waivers?
Sure.
Checklist waivers from the site plan?
Yeah, so just real quick, we've gone through the engineer's portion of the report, and there are a small handful of things we would like to ask for waivers from before we start testimony. I'm on Mr. McLaren's report, page 11 of 13, under the engineering review. We would like to request a waiver from item 9. Frankly, that items really aren't applicable to this project. Item 13, which is stormwater management, because this does not meet the threshold of a major development. Item 15, the circulation plan. Our plan does show the traffic circulation already, but we're requesting a waiver from actually providing a specific circulation plan. And then item 26, a traffic impact statement. I would suggest that this ordinance, your ordinance permits commercial on the ground floor, and it permits up to 4.29 units is the density requirement. We're 3 units and commercial on the ground floor, which are all permitted uses. And the way transportation plan works in the master plan, if you have permitted use in the zone, you're meeting the density. It's understood that your adjacent streets should have the capacity to be able to support those uses. So for that reason, we don't believe that a traffic impact statement should be necessary for a
It's
project.
anticipated, if a use is permitted, it's anticipated that planning has planned for that use and traffic attendant to that use.
That's correct, yes. So we are respectfully requesting a waiver from that. Any of the other items that came out of the engineer's report that have been brought into Mr. McLaren's report, we will accommodate as a condition of approval if we're fortunate enough to receive one.
That's fine.
Okay.
Good, Mayor?
Got it.
John, take the board through the existing conditions at the site, the zoning, and what is proposed.
Sure. This is this existing survey that was submitted with the application. I think everybody's familiar with it. Love it or hate it, it's probably become a visual icon in the community at this point.
Like Lucy.
Just like Lucy, yeah, exactly. So the building sits as it does in the gray shaded area here. There is an existing 10-space parking lot off of Franklin Avenue. The building, this project, and there's also a residential unit above. The project's been the subject of multiple applications over the years. And our client is here to do tonight what this property, what is really warranted on this property, to make it a very, very viable mixed-use development, which I think, based on other applications we have done and based on the changes, the ordinance changes that this board has moved forward, I think this, my opinion is, this is the model version of what we would be looking for on this site. Just go to my site plan. So the proposal, as Chris already described, is ground floor commercial with residential units above. But what the ordinance changes have done is they've created a level of further control over this type of project beyond what some of the prior projects that have been approved have done. And what I mean by that is we've tried to create the appropriate balance of commercial on the ground floor while still providing appropriate parking both for the commercial and the residential, but obviously we don't want to lose the residential component. The one item that was put into the new ordinance is with regard to the square footage. You have, for every square foot of commercial space, you can only have 2 square feet of residential space. What that did in an application like this is it let the design team recognize that, you know what, 4 units, which is permitted by density, they really don't work. The units get too small, they're something that people aren't gonna want. So those new standards, just by virtue of the dimensions, reduce the density down to 3 units. So that change made a meaningful difference in the way this application is being presented, because we are at 3 units where 4 units is what would be permitted per your density ordinance of 2,200 square feet per unit. So in laying out the site, it's pretty simple. We've got commercial on the ground floor at its maximum extent. What do I mean by that? Well, if we're going to get parking in, work from the back forward. We want to have some little green space to buffer the residential behind us so we can get a landscape hedge in there. We've got the ordinance requirement for our parking depth. We've minimized, we're our one way, so we've minimized the width of our parking aisle to the greatest extent that we can, but it still has to work. That established the back wall of our commercial space. It is what it is. There's not much more we can do about that. We then move forward toward the streets in 3 directions. Chris pointed out the discussion of, although you put a 6-foot dimension in your new ordinance for mixed-use projects like this, we don't believe it is necessary on this project or appropriate on this project because of the fact that we have land and parking behind us that we can then address the potential issues that result from having a building this size that is not set back. So we go forward to basically to the front property line. We've left a little relief so we can get foundations in that aren't encroaching on the public right-of-way in the front and the side. And Peter very wisely pulled back the Franklin Avenue side even a little bit more to make certain that the electric meters and gas meter are on the private property and not encroaching upon the sidewalk. So that maxed out our commercial building footprint. That's the most commercial space you can feasibly get on this property at almost just about 3,200 square feet. Above that is 3 units. 3 units that are each 3-bedroom, and they meet all of.
I'm sorry, 3,300 square feet.
30. What did I say? 30. Yeah, 3,300 square feet. Sorry about that. 3 units that each have 3 bedrooms in them. The way the site circulation works is you're one way in off Frontenac Avenue, you're one way out on Franklin Avenue. We have 11 parking spaces that line up along the back of the building. Access for the residential units, there is a rear access from the residential units into a little vestibule area. That vestibule has individual storage and trash rooms for each one of the residential units, so they have a spot to store their trash.
That's enclosed, John, enclosed trash, enclosed
It is
storage?
enclosed, that's correct. And then the commercial units each have their own trash exterior, so they are kept separate. They are not being mixed.
And we'll show appropriate screening on the trash enclosure?
That is correct, yes. Operationally, deliveries, in all likelihood for the 2 commercial units will happen in the drive aisle in the back of the building. The truck will pull in, sit in that drive aisle early in the morning or what have you, to be able to load into the building. Access for the commercial space is right off the sidewalk, I think just as the master plan is looking for it to be. And as Chris was mentioning, Peter has designed the building such that we are proposing to elevate the floor over a foot above the sidewalk. We're taking it to elevation 6.5 and 6.8, which what that does is it may not sound like a big elevation difference, because the sidewalks are in the 5.5 range. But that's the range that you see a lot of nuisance flooding. So that's the range where if you can get that floor to 6.8 in that range, that takes care of the majority of our storm events. Does it take care of a hurricane? No. And that's why you still have to dry flood-proof the building to meet the standards. But we're proposing some steps up, some interior ramps, so we are accommodating the needs of access and getting the building up without having to give up the 6-foot front yard setback. What we're also doing, which I think is important, the 6-foot setback around the building or in front of the building, it makes sense when you have a very tight lot. And what I mean by that is, if you have a lot, a commercial lot in town, and they want to rebuild it, and there's no parking, there's nothing. It's just the lot is the building. You know, you don't really have, and you've dealt with this on other applications, you don't really have the space to properly address trash and loading and things that go along with a commercial project. We have the benefit of all of that to the rear. So by requiring a 6-foot setback on 3 sides, as Chris pointed out, you eliminate almost 1,300 square feet, believe it or not, of commercial space. But it's at what value? Because we can meet all the needs of this project on the site because we have the parking area and the way that the site lays out. So there is really, we believe, no benefit for this project to having that 6-foot setbacks.
And it's, obviously, it's consistent with what the master plan has and consistent with the development pattern throughout the rest of the city.
It is, 100%, yes. So as far as the balance of the site layout is concerned, the access, there's an interior corridor that is for the elevator and stairs up to the residential units, again, right in the middle of the site. This area that you see here is that's an overbuild. You're driving under that to get to any of these parking spaces. The site will obviously be landscaped in all the green areas that you see. The back area will have appropriate site lighting that we will shield so that it's not a nuisance to either of the adjacent residences.
Pete, you want to just show the board before I do the variances with John, just show them the front elevation and kind of describe how the building operates? I think it looks nice.
Okay, well, I think John pretty well covered the plan aspect of the project. So the elevations are basically the materials will be thin brick at the ground level, which is the commercial space. Fiber cement siding above with a metal roof and cable rails for the doors for the commercial spaces and the residential are kind of symmetrically placed. Blocks above, if you will, the residential spaces.
Pete, you had that dip in the middle or the void in the middle. How does that explain?
Oh, well, this is basic, well, if you look at the plan. Well, one other thing I want to point out real quickly. Just in doing this, you know, we're keeping the doors, the entrance to the building for the commercial spaces at the sidewalk level. So, you know, this is dropped down, whereas inside it would be up a foot. So, I think that was important. Keep it kind of consistent with the...
And let me look at that. With respect to the height, in this zone, we could do 34 feet from curb, right? With no pitch on the roof?
Right.
And where are we at, Pete?
So we, go back. We desired 3 feet to the height because, you know, I mean, we could actually, you know, lop 3 foot off the top because this is all attic space. But at that point, you wouldn't see the roof. So we want to be able, it's really aesthetic. We would just want to be able to see the roof. I mean, you know, going the effort to build it, we want to be able to see it.
So the additional 3 feet height is for the aesthetic, for the sloped roof?
Yeah, we don't gain any floor space as a result of doing that. So, just the way the plan worked out, basically, this is just roof over this area. So the 2 units are sort of like separate.
Where's Ventnor Avenue? Got it.
So it kind of reduces the volume, I guess you'd say, at the second floor, because this is all basically roof area. So it sort of separates it.
So for a substantial portion of the building, you have at least a 25-foot setback for at least half the building?
Well, this area here, it's over 20 feet.
Right.
Up in here, it's greater than 40 feet.
Okay, thanks, Pete.
Pete, on the trash, say again, for the residents, is that on the first floor?
So there's a core, yeah, there's kind of core area.
There's 3
here.
storage rooms there for trash for the,
Yeah, we have the storage areas that are required and necessary for bikes and that kind of stuff. This is accessible, this area is accessible both from the rear, from the parking area, and from the street.
okay.
And this gets you into the elevator and the stair that goes.
And the other trash is solely for the commercial?
Yes.
This area here, yes.
Okay, is that going to be enclosed at all, or
Yes, screen,
screen?
screen.
Like a door closed in front of the trash bins or anything?
Like an enclosure with the,
Yeah,
I was showing basically a wall around 3 sides. I don't know whether you need it.
I guess they're about 8-foot size dumpsters, 6 or 8 foot.
Yeah, they're standard size.
Because we don't know what kind of commercials going in there, we don't know what kind of trash they will generate.
Correct.
Correct? You know?
No idea who's
We
going
don't
to
know, we
occupy
just
the
don't know.
space.
Okay, all right.
thanks,
Very
Peter.
good. Thank
Good, thank you. John, you want to run through this? John, what I did want to say was, under the new ordinance, we're not required to raise the building, is that right? That's something we're doing out of caution and to at least try to address the flood issue.
No, yeah, we are not required to, both under the ordinance or under the building code. Because the commercial space of the ground floor, we could dry flood-proof.
The whole thing?
And just maintain the floor at the existing grade, but frankly, it's not the prudent thing to do in new construction. When you have a method in which to improve upon your floor elevation, you want to try to do it.
And also, it seems to be recommended with the new ordinance.
That's correct.
From a C variance perspective, C2 variance perspective, we'll do a global for the whole project. Do you think the project, as shown, advances the municipal land use law and the positive criteria?
Yeah, 100%. So, and I just want to touch on each of the variances specifically, I think is important. I have already talked about the setback issue, the 6-foot setbacks on the 3 frontages, and why we believe that with this specific design, it's something that is really not necessary and provides no value. I do want to talk, Peter just mentioned the height issue. The height is 100% an aesthetic topic. Peter gave me a dimension of about 31 feet up to the eave, so in theory, the building could be 3 foot higher at the sidewalk line and a flat roof, which would not be the better plan. Dropping the eave height down and having a sloping roof that you can see certainly is the better plan from an aesthetic perspective. And then I think also importantly, and Chris pointed out with regard to the parking, while we are fully compliant, each unit will have 2 spaces assigned to it. We will have 5 parking spaces for the commercial, and that is a deviation from the ordinance. But again, you have to put into perspective, we talk about commercial parking all the time. To meet the needs of just the commercial piece of it, forget about the residential piece of it, to meet the needs of the commercial piece of it, we would need 17 spaces. So all of those spaces, this drive aisle, and another 2/3 of those spaces on the other side of that drive aisle would have to be constructed in order to have commercial space. So your ordinance currently doesn't work if you want commercial space on these properties. It just doesn't.
I mean, John, we have the same ordinance standard as like Hamilton Township for the Hamilton Mall.
Yeah, 1 per 200 square feet is a suburban standard for
Retail
commercial
parking,
space. 100%, that is true. So with all these projects that we've done and many of the ones that have been approved, you make certain that you have the residential parking because you know those residents are going to have cars, they're going to need somewhere, and if they don't have parking on site, they've now cluttered the neighborhood.
And we will identify on site the spaces that are dedicated to the residential.
Yes. We do have the benefit of still providing some on-site commercial space, which many of the projects don't have the space or the benefit of doing that. So we think that this project goes very far to assisting in making sure that it meets the parking standards the best that it possibly can. But we believe that providing real meaningful 3,200 square feet of commercial space is a much greater benefit than trying to provide the balance of parking that would allow, if I had to guess, you probably would be down to, I don't know, 1,500 square feet of commercial space. What's that?
It's like Jefferson Avenue.
So that's something the board has to weigh. I know they have on many applications, but it's a barrier island issue. It's not just Margate, it's every community that we work within.
And so the board's comfortable. I've given Leo an exhibit list, which includes about 10 years' worth of resolutions, about 10 resolutions showing that the board has granted that variance in the past. I'm not going to go through them like I've done before. I just put them in evidence, that's all.
John, I mean, it's a sad state of affairs, I have to say this, but it needs to be a condition that parking is free and clearly marked for the residential units, and it's not a joke.
I understand where you're
That's
coming from.
acceptable.
I understand where you're coming from.
That's acceptable.
So they're the variances, all the variances that we're requesting are C variances. I believe that they can all be justified under the C2 criteria, where the benefits of the deviation outweigh any potential detriments. While there are deviations, so they have purpose, I think we've described them in detail. We don't think that they create any negative impact to the surrounding land use or the surrounding neighbors. We believe that with the changes that this board and the commissioners have made to your ordinance with regard to mixed-use projects, we believe this project meets the overall intent of what you were trying to accomplish. And we believe that there's an aesthetic argument to be made. We certainly believe that there is a general welfare argument to be made on this application because of how much commercial we're giving you and the fact that we are in mixed-use zone and providing a mixed-use type of building that we think is very aesthetically pleasing. So for all those reasons, we believe that the positive criteria is established. With regard to the negative criteria, there's some...
With respect to the flood prevention of flood and damage from flood, obviously the raising of the building, for a commercial building, is helpful as well.
Correct. The building will be fully flood compliant. Obviously, it's required to be. It will have to meet the dry flood proof standards. But as I already discussed, we are also elevating the floor to help eliminate any potential nuisance flooding.
You think the variance can be granted without substantial detriment to the public good?
I do. I think that this is a benefit to the commercial corridor of Ventnor Avenue. I think this is a long time coming for this site. You know, Dr. Pastore has tried a number of things on the property to make it a successful property for the town. And, you know, that hasn't worked out to his favor so far. I think this is the right application for this site.
Do you think the variance can be granted without substantial impact to the zone plan and the zoning ordinance?
I do. Although the ordinance on this, for this type of building is recent and new, I think we've discussed the deviations that we're asking for and that they have particular purpose without creating any negative impact. Every one of these cases would stand on its own. You may have a different opinion on a site that comes in with just one street frontage and can't meet some of their standards with regard to trash and parking, or trash and ramps and stairs and things. We don't have that issue here because we're able to service this building from the back, and we're trying to max out the commercial space, which is, we think, is the intent of the ordinance as well.
And your argument earlier that the consistency with the master plan and consistency with the development pattern of the commercial zone of Margate stands true for any impact in the zone plan or zoning ordinance?
Yes, that is correct. And what I also said earlier is the new ordinance essentially dictated that this ended up being a 3-unit project to be an appropriately sized and successful project, and that's exactly where it is, although your density actually would permit 4 units.
Thanks, John. And so the board knows, for the record, from an environmental standpoint, some may ask, the property was cleaned by the bank before it was sold. To the extent I can find, 20 years ago, to the extent I can find that, I'll provide it to Jim. That's all I have.
John, I have a question. You mentioned storage for bicycles, surfboards, and things like that. Where will that be, and how much room does each unit going to have, and will it be adequate? Like, if each room has 3 bedrooms, 3 bicycles.
So, it's on the ground floor. How big are those spaces?
So you're saying it meets the requirements for the ordinance of the 3 feet?
Yes, it's saying if it meets the requirement.
So each unit gets a 5 by 6 foot space.
The ordinance requires 250 cubic feet. But we got high ceilings, so yes.
Well, height doesn't really help.
Do they comply with the ordinance?
Is that for all 3 of them, or is that
No.
for each one?
For each one. Each unit gets one of those.
5 by 6. And will this going to be each unit, like condoed out?
Yes.
With condo association?
Yes.
Anything else, Steve?
So they're gonna be individually owned? And we don't have stores per se that you have?
We don't have tenants yet, but the likelihood is it'll be retail. Likelihood is, but there are no tenants yet.
Anybody else from the board?
A little bit of a technical question, that third unit that's exposed underneath, the utilities, the plumbing, I mean, we have problems in the winter with pipes freezing here in Margate. That'll somehow be managed? Okay. Yeah, no worries. He said it's covered by the building code. They're fairly large retail units for Margate? Any?
That's what you asked for.
Fair enough.
What,
Try to make it work.
for this overhang, this is gonna be a drive-through, a drive underneath. What's the height gonna be? Can we get a box truck under that?
It'll be over 10 feet.
What was your answer, Pete? I didn't.
More than 10 feet.
More than 10 feet. But a tractor trailer.
Never make the turn.
Never make the turn.
You get your truck in there?
Hey, parking garages are 6'6".
There won't be trash trucks going through underneath there, will there? They'll be in the street picking up? Do we know?
Correct.
What?
You're correct. They'll be rolled out in the street.
They'd probably be on the street, on Frontenac Avenue, or
They
Franklin.
don't have to go on.
On Frontenac, yes.
We don't expect deliveries any different than any other retail store. We don't expect tractor trailers. Maybe a box truck, I don't know how high they are. But they'll know after the first time they go there that they're either going to stay outside or they're not going to go
If
through.
it doesn't fit, they're gonna stay on the street.
That's my point.
Or knock down the third window.
I-95.
I was in Philly all the time.
Put a note there, 10 foot.
Anybody else from the board? Okay. Anyone from the public like to speak?
Name and address, please.
Howard Seiden, 8008 Ventnor Avenue. Well, first of all, it looks like a great plan.
Mr. Seiden, you swear to tell the
I
truth?
do. Looks like a great plan. I just saw it tonight, but as we all know, anything will look better than what's there now. So I have two questions. One to ask is, I don't understand, and I'm not complaining, just so I learn. You're going a foot for, you said about the floor, for the flood, but the door is at street level entrance.
Ramps up.
So you walk up a ramp into the thing? Because somebody could trip, it's not a stair, is it, to go into the building? Okay, that's cool. And another thing, so for 42 years, I've wondered, why is the light at Franklin and Ventnor there, right in front of Nitwit, the traffic light?
Right.
But you go into Essex, and you come around, you go in to Franklin, you go into that light. But you come down Frontenac from Winchester, and you go to Essex to cross the street, you don't have a light there. Why didn't they ever turn it to where you go to the light? Do you understand what I'm asking? You're coming down Frontenac from Winchester, right?
Right.
And then you turn to go to Taylor's Exxon, up that street.
Right.
Right.
Go to the post office.
Well, why don't you
There's
reverse
no
the
light.
flow?
Go to the light.
There's no light,
Is that what you're
right?
saying? Reverse
But
the
why
flow?
is the light at Nitwit on that side? What does it do? What does that light do?
There's no traffic control there. There's everything to control traffic there.
Yeah, what does that light do?
Aggravate you.
Controls traffic.
I just wonder, I just want, why isn't it coming down Frontenac and going to that way, and then you wouldn't have people at Essex?
People come out of your parking lot and cross the street.
Yeah, no, yeah. But no, I think it's a great plan. I think, like I
Howard,
said.
that's a city question, that's not.
Yeah, I know,
mean,
I know.
it's
I was
not a
just
planning-
throw- I was-
We don't know either.
But,
Howard,
yeah,
I
you guys,
do believe that Roger can confirm this, that the city did come up with a traffic flow plan about 10 years ago.
Right, and that's a county.
No,
county
no,
owns those traffic
I'm
signals.
not, it doesn't affect me either way.
So,
You know,
no,
just
but
like,
they were talking about
if-
realigning
if
all
it-
the streets so that they flowed better, because we have streets at dead end
Yeah.
at Ventnor
Yeah.
So I think that's somewhere hidden in the works.
Okay, no problem. But I think it's a great plan.
Manager's desk.
Thanks, Howard.
Sure.
At the bottom.
Anyone else?
Kenneth Robinson?
I'm a Realtor, Berkshire Hathaway, by the
All
way.
right. Mr. Robinson, do you
Yes.
swear to tell the truth?
Absolutely, no
Okay,
problem
thank
at all. I live on Frontenac. Okay, but that's not the reason I'm here, because I live on Frontenac. I think it's a great idea. I think it's beautiful. I like to sell them as a realtor, but that's the matter. I like to sell them for you. They're beautiful. I think they'll be great. But here are my questions. The drive-in, number one. Is it going to have signs that it's only one way? Because that's an issue. People coming in on Frontenac and out on the other street. Okay, that's like kind of important, that it only goes one way, because there's a problem with that. I have a little bit of a problem with the trash pickup by looking at the plans. Where's the trash going to be picked up? Because while I'm looking at it right now, if you're going to take the trash cans out, they're going to sit on the sidewalk. So that I don't understand. Can you explain that?
Like everywhere else.
Sit on
Okay, so they're going to sit, so all the trash from all this is going to be sitting on the sidewalk. Is that correct?
Residential.
Every house in town, every house in town has trash.
Okay.
Residential.
But you're
The
talking about-
residential,
You're
right,
talking about stores too.
no, you're not.
I'm not?
The stores are dumpsters.
Okay.
They'll be rolled out when the truck is there.
There are dumpsters on site, not on the sidewalk,
Okay,
that will be rolled out when trash gets picked up.
okay,
There are residential trash which is enclosed on site
okay,
until the night before trash day.
okay. That's just a question.
For their own trash pickup.
Okay, fine. Question about parking, which is a very important thing if you're going to sell these units, which I would love to do, of course, is that how are you going to distinguish between residential spots and commercial spots?
They just made it a condition that it's marked.
What?
They just made it a condition that is
Oh, it's going to be
designated by
marked?
unit.
Okay,
That's a
important.
condition of approval.
Yeah, because people are going to go in and out and take that. Okay, great, I'm answering it. I guess that's it. The only problem I do have, and a question I do have, and I think someone brought it up already, was the fact of the height of the underpass with trucks going in underneath there. I think that has to be really marked very strongly, that trucks so-and-so should not be entering under there. That's all.
What's your address on Frontenac?
Huh?
What's your address on Frontenac?
I right around the corner there.
We need, Mr. Robinson, we need it, she's
We
asking me
need a
too.
number.
We need it for the record. We're not trying to,
3 North.
there you go.
I'm right behind.
Thank you.
And like I said, I'm right behind, and I'm happy with this being done, because what's there now is an eyesore, and I think this will improve the whole area and the neighborhood. I mean that.
You're gonna get some trees, some shrubbery.
No, I agree. I'm
too.
with it. You're the guy?
That's the guy, Kenny. And he can sell them for you.
Okay.
Anything else you want to ask me?
No,
Thanks, Kenny.
thanks, Harry. Thanks, Harry.
Kenny, the
I got a question for Dr. Pastore. You're not going to charge extra for the parking spaces for the residential, are you?
Yeah.
Never mind, it was a joke. All right. Anybody else from the? Okay.
All right.
My name is Van Carlucci. I live at 221 North Lancaster. I think it's a great idea. You're getting rid of an eyesore.
Swear to tell the truth?
Swear to tell the truth, whole truth.
Thank you.
I think it's a great idea, getting rid of an eyesore. I thought the burger bus was cool, but it's had its time, and now you're going to make the street look a lot better. I think putting the street frontage, not pushing it back, is a good idea too. I think you'd be wasting space, and I think he's going to build a beautiful building.
Thanks, man.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks for hanging out.
Okay. Anybody else?
Jeff Silverian, 9612 Amherst. Yes.
I'm sorry, your last name again?
Silverian.
Silverian. And Mr. Silverian, do you swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
I do.
Thanks.
Yes. Longtime resident, owns for 24 years. Permanent resident, though, for the last 2 years here in Margate. Family originated in Longport, still a family home in the 50s, so I've been here a long time. I think the advancement of families coming down, we heard a couple periods ago of a family moving down. I moved myself down. There are others. I remember what it was 50 years ago. Weren't a lot of people around, but now there are, and I think Margate's doing a great job. I think we need more commercial space because of that, more businesses here in town. I'll be honest with you, I go to Summers Point quite often to do my shopping and to buy things that I need that I can't find here in Margate. So I think the commercial space is a great idea. I think it's a mixed use with the residential. I think conforming from 4 down to 3 makes a lot of sense as well. So I think it's a great idea, and I think it's a great project. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anybody? Go ahead.
Close the public. I have one comment when you're done.
All right, public portion is closed.
We just, John's discussing having the option for the dumpsters possibly to be here. We're gonna look at it here or here, if that's okay with the board. There are reasons for that John explained to me. Number one, the residential unit sticks out over here.
Might be easier
And for pickup, it might be easier here. We gotta look at it and see if it
Right.
works. Okay, just to have that option.
I agree with that,
Thanks.
yeah.
You're doing it, or you want the option?
The option to do it, gotta look at it,
Right.
thank you.
I think that's a good option.
The other thing is, you and I were just discussing, we will, I think it's gonna be, it'll be a good plan to actually put a clearance sign on the edge of that building on front end. Just so because the current commercial spaces, if those truck drivers, they know their clearance. So if if it's signed,
Not all.
well, that's true.
John, I watched a car go underneath an overhang with bicycles on the road.
Yeah, it happens. I'm not saying it doesn't
And I
happen.
saw him make a big mess out of a condo unit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that it?
That's it.
Yeah.
All right. Public's closed. Chris, Chris and John advanced some arguments as to, if we look at it from a 6-foot setback perspective, why they're really maybe not applicable to an application like this and why the deviations would be justified. Given the somewhat strange history, they filed before, that was like a year ago. I don't know what happened with application fees, escrow fees, whether they were refiled, repaid. I think out of an abundance of caution, we should call them 6-foot setbacks just for purposes of when we frame the variance motions. Sounds like you offered some good justification. So, and in terms of the conditions, maybe I'll go through those first. You're going to label the parking for the residential. You're going to label them per unit or just say residential and deal with that like in the master deed?
Residential.
Right. But then the master deed will specify unit 1 gets,
Right. Which spaces are for what unit.
okay.
But they will all be labeled either per unit or residential, probably per unit.
Okay. Okay.
Probably should label the commercial too, so people don't.
Well, yeah, should be a sign that says commercial.
Fair enough.
Okay, so note that.
At no charge.
You're
Seriously.
at no charge.
Well, that's got to be in the condition. I want it on the record.
There's only very few people who could think of that. I mean, you.
I'll note that they have the option to take a look at it, potentially relocate that dumpster to the other side of the property. John, you think you're going to put that clearance sign? If I put it in a resolution, okay with that?
I think we should.
Okay, the clearance for the entrance. And then the relief that the applicant needs, and then the other standard conditions we put in any resolution, subject to any outside approvals. Is this the county Ventnor Road?
Yes.
Yes.
Applicant will comply with any representations it made during the course of the hearing and subject to any conditions in Mr. McLaren's report unless otherwise addressed. So those are the conditions, but the relief they need are preliminary and final, major site plan approval, and the following C variances: a front yard setback along Frontenac Avenue, 6 feet required. They have 0.67 feet. Front yard setback along Ventnor Avenue, 6 feet required. They have 0.67 feet. Front yard setback along Franklin Avenue, 6 feet required. They're at 2.16 feet there. The building height, 34 feet required for the commercial from the curb, and they're at 37 feet, but that's still a C variance. And then the parking, 17 spaces are required, and for the commercial, residential is going to comply, and they have 5 commercial spaces. Again, I said what the conditions are, that the checklist waivers we went over, the items that John went through will be waived, and they'll comply or address the other items as conditions of approval also.
One additional waiver recommendation is the waiver to require them to abide by the streetscape standards. We've been having issues with the county.
Roger, Pete and I were just talking about that. I was actually going to jump up and just say, we will propose whatever the city of Margate would like, but we know they're not permitting anything these days. They don't want street trees, they don't want non-decorable concrete, they just want concrete sidewalks and nothing else. So whatever the county makes us do is what we would like to be the condition of this approval, so we
Right,
don't get
and-
stuck.
No, we'll show that on the plan when we go to the county.
Yes.
Okay.
And my thought is, any streetscape project should be a city project now, so we have consistency. It's hard doing it piecemeal,
Right.
so.
Roger, I saw that the corner had just been redone, both corners for handicap accessibility. It's just recently redone within the last year.
Right,
They should-
as part of the traffic
They
signal.
should remain
Don't touch them.
don't touch them.
It's done.
All right.
I'll make that motion.
A second.
All in favor?
You wish.
Tom Collins?
Well, John and crew, you guys did another really good job. However, Mr. Ballinson, I do not agree with your assessment on the setbacks. And I think that the ordinance, the way it's written right now, is really, really good for the city of Margate. In this case here, it's a typical example of you have super wide sidewalks, you have a lot of open space, and we can afford to give that variance. If we made everything 0 setbacks like they were, and Roger really worked hard on this, it just opens a door for a lot of problems. At least here, we can see what it is, we can work with you, and we can get a good project, which we ended up doing. And having the 2-to-1 ratio for the residential really, really helps. So the hardship here, to me, is the location of the property, the corners, the streets. Winchester Road is like a pool or a swimming pool when it rains. So things have to be done. As far as the C2 criterion, I think we're making a major improvement. We're improving the business district. We're trying to bring things up, and hopefully we'll have businesses coming in that'll complement Howard's business. And it'll just make the city a better place, so I vote in favor.
Richard Patterson?
You said there'll be 2 real estate offices?
Yeah, Kenny's open.
And a rooftop bar.
A big part of the 6-foot setback was to have the ramps up to meet the floor being raised. You put that inside the building, so I think it really makes sense. The fact that you have 3 frontages with 6-foot setbacks is really a hardship. I'm really impressed with this. I mean, you go from, Chris doesn't say bedrooms matter, I say it does. I have a problem with density, even though it's allowed 4 units, but you're right in the middle of the central business district, putting all these residential units. That creates more parking problems than commercial spaces do. So you're going from your original plan, I think had 16 bedrooms, you're going down to 9 bedrooms, you got 3 families instead of 4 families. I applaud everybody involved with this project. I think you did a great job. I don't see any negatives, and I really think it'll be a boon for Margate. I approve.
Michael Richmond?
Yeah, I think pointing out the how much smaller the commercial would be if the setbacks were enforced was a pretty compelling argument. I have a couple issues with the new ordinance too, but the 2-for-1 thing worked out good in this case. And like Rich said, putting making a vestibule inside as a way of raising the floor elevation is a good idea. Again, I don't want to keep repeating myself, but, commercial parking in Margate is tough. I think it's a good project. I think it's going to be definitely better than what's there now, a lot better, and I'm going to approve it.
Stephen Giesecke.
I want to reiterate what Tom was saying, because I do think that 6-foot setback is very important, because we don't know what's going to be in these stores. And, there's a coffee shop in Ventnor, and this weekend, people were just lined up down the block, people trying to sit out there. We don't know if people are going to bring tables and chairs out there. That kind of really narrows it down just to have a sidewalk. Plus, we're trying to make this a walkable, bikeable community where we're trying to add bike racks. And I don't see any bike racks over here, but it would be nice if we start adding these in the stores. I think it's really important. And what Rich was saying about the density, I think, especially in the business district, the table. That all being said, I have to, that you started this project before, and I don't know where we are with that, but I'm going to approve this project under these circumstances, but okay, so I approve.
Michael Ruffey.
I really don't have anything to add to what the other board members have already said. I think it's a great project, and I vote yes on it.
Margaret Gubernalty.
This has always been a controversial piece of real estate there on that corner. Yeah, I do think. I was around on the board when they fought for the mini golf course, which was a debacle. And so we were excited to get anything but that, so we got the burger bus, and people went crazy about that as well. I would love to see a gas station just because I want one, but but I think we finally got it right. I think it's a great blend into the neighborhood. It's a permitted use. The project meets the intent of our ordinance. The positive criteria certainly outweigh the negative. And yeah, we finally got it right, and I approve.
John Pitts.
Yeah, I approve. I think between this site and the Billy Ho's site, at least this end of town will be exactly what we're looking for Margate going forward. I approve.
Jim Galantino.
Don't forget the vault's still there from the bank. The collective federal bank vault is still in that building.
What's buried under it?
Let's start. So Pinky's right, this is the third application for this property. I thought the golf course was a great idea, but it got shut down. It's now here. You did. And now the burger bus, I thought was going to be a big hit, and it didn't turn out so well. But I think the doc hit this a home run here, and I hope this does work. And I approve the application.
Craig Palmisano.
Yeah, I like the look of the whole building. The metal roof is going to really jump out at you on Ventnor Avenue there. It's going to be very nice. And bringing it up to the curb, or to the zero setback, is what all the other buildings in the next 2 blocks are like now. And the 2-to-1 commercial and residential is perfect. It's what we've been looking for. Consistency on the setbacks, like I said, on the two blocks there, it's going to fit in very nicely. I sure wish it's going to clean up that street there. I wish we could clean the gas station up too, that's next to it, but we can't do anything about that at this time. But I approve, and I wish you good luck.
The application is approved with 9 in favor and 0 opposed.
Thank you all very much.
So Chris, don't push your luck now, it's 2.
Motion to close the meeting?
Public.
Motion to close the meeting?
Yeah.
Just asked if anyone from the
Anybody else have anything from the public to say? No, public portions closed. All right, do I get a second? Steve, all in favor? Aye.
Aye. Aye.